Hello everyone and welcome back to the Mr. Night Scares story. Now, I know a lot of you use these videos to sleep, so before you drift off, I thought it would be a fun idea if everyone can leave a comment to let me know where you are listening from in the world. Also, like and subscribe if you are enjoying the case. Right, let's get comfy and relax and let's begin. Story 1. On April 27, 2014, the local police received a call from a man named Lon. Mr. Lon said that his son was missing. The missing person's name is Lon Qua, 36 years old. He is the owner of a factory and a very diligent person at work. Normally, he would be busy all day, but on April 27th, even though it was late, the factory staff still did not see Qua come. The factory had some work that needed him to decide, but because they could not contact him, they had to go to his father to ask if he knew where he was. At first, Mr. Lon simply thought that maybe his son went to negotiate a job or attend a party, so it was normal that he could not contact him for a while. But after calling many times without his son answering, in the evening, he hurriedly contacted his son's girlfriend, Wang Jingguan, to see if she knew where he was. Jingguan was also very surprised when she heard. She said that she had not seen Qua since the evening of the 26th, still thinking that he might be busy and staying at the factory. Hearing this, the whole family anxiously searched everywhere for Qua's whereabouts. But until noon the next day, there was still no news. Only then did Mr. Lon realize that something might have happened to his son. So he hurriedly called the police station to report the case. After receiving the report, the police immediately went to Qua's factory to investigate. Through the investigation of the factory staff, the police learned that on the 26th, the boss was busy at the factory until dawn the next day before driving away. The police thought that it was after work he might have gone home, so they decided to check the surveillance cameras at Qua's residence. As a result, they actually saw his image. The camera showed that at around 3 a.m. on April 27th, Qua drove into the underground parking lot. At that time, he was wearing a blue and white striped shirt and had a bag on his shoulder. The next video was recorded from the elevator camera. In the video, Qua can be seen yawning and then calmly pressing the button for the 9th floor, where he lives with his girlfriend. The elevator door opened, he walked out, and that was the last image of him recorded by the camera. After that moment, no other camera in the building could see his image. After determining that Qua had exited the elevator on the 9th floor, the police quickly arrived at the apartment where he lived with his girlfriend. They searched everywhere but found no trace of him. In an effort to find out the reason, the police talked to Jingguan, Qua's girlfriend, to see if there had been any recent conflicts between the two that caused him to leave. When asked, Jingguan appeared to be in great pain. Tears fell as she confided to the police that Qua was the person she loved the most and that she had not been able to eat or sleep in the past few days, only tossing and turning, worrying about her lover's safety. When the police asked about the day Qua went missing and whether he had shown any unusual behavior, Jingguan said that he had only said that he was going to meet a client at the hotel that night. At first, she did not think much of it, guessing that he had probably drunk too much and stayed overnight before going straight to the factory. It was only when she received a call from his father that she was shocked to realize that no one had been able to contact Qua. Jingguan also revealed that Qua had bipolar disorder, and she was afraid that he might have done something stupid because he could not handle the pressure of work. With this information, the police went down to the underground parking lot to search Qua's car and investigate the surrounding area. Throughout this process, Jingguan followed closely. She was so tired that she fell asleep on a nearby motorbike while the police were working. Judging by her exhausted appearance, it could be seen that she had not had a full night's sleep in the past few days. Although the police repeatedly advised her to go home and rest, Jingguan insisted on staying. She said she needed to know all the news about Qua as soon as possible. After hours of meticulous searching, the police still did not find any significant clues. Qua's car was still sitting in the parking lot, not moving at all. Since the building had many elevators with different exits, the police checked the cameras of all the elevators, thinking that Qua might have used another elevator to go down. But after reviewing all the footage from the past few days, they did not see any image of him leaving the building. This incident left the investigators extremely bewildered. How could someone disappear without a trace? Knowing that Qua was a businessman, the police began to expand their investigation to his business and social relationships. The results showed that the company Kwa founded 2 years ago was developing very well, without any disputes or financial difficulties. Emotionally, he and his girlfriend Jingguan had lived together for many years. Jingguan was 11 years older than him. They had a sisterly relationship, and their feelings had always been good. When the investigation into the relationship did not yield any results, the police decided to go back and carefully examine all the surveillance cameras in the building. This time, an unusual video caught their attention. At around 5 p.m., 2 days after Kwa went missing, the elevator camera captured the image of a suspicious figure. It was a person wearing a red shirt and a helmet, and from the way he moved and looked, the police determined that it was most likely a woman. It is worth noting that this person was dressed unusually. Her entire body was carefully covered with a thick coat, regardless of the weather, while the people around her were wearing short-sleeved shirts to keep cool. This person's outfit became even more prominent and suspicious. What was more special was that this mysterious woman continuously used the elevator for 4 to 5 hours, and each time she appeared, she carried many bags of different sizes. Through monitoring the surveillance camera, the police recorded that this mysterious woman used the elevator 5 times, transporting a total of 11 bags of goods. However, because this person covered her entire body carefully, they could not determine her identity. During the investigation of this period of time, another detail attracted the attention of the police. In addition to the mysterious woman in red, they also discovered another person who frequently moved many bags of goods using the elevator. This person appeared openly, without any concealment, and the bags they carried seemed lighter. It was Jingguan. What was remarkable was that the police noticed a suspicious coincidence. Jingguan and the woman in red were almost identical in height and build. This discovery raised a question for the investigators. Could the mysterious woman in red be Jingguan in disguise? If they were the same person, why did Jingguan constantly change her outfit? Sometimes secretly disguised, sometimes appearing in public? If they were not the same person, then who was the mysterious woman in red? Because previous investigations failed to uncover any other suspects or clues, Jingguan suddenly became the focus of police attention. Through investigating her background, the police learned that Jingguan is 47 years old this year. Her birth name is Hang Ma, born in Fuan. Her life has experienced many ups and downs. When she was young, she got married in China and had 2 children, a boy and a girl, with her first husband. Her first marriage ended in pain when she discovered her husband was having an affair and decided to divorce. In 1996, fate brought her to know a Taiwanese man 9 years older than her through a marriage brokerage company. The following year, at the age of 30, she got married for the second time and moved to Taiwan to live. But it seemed that happiness had not yet smiled on her. Her second marriage also did not bring the joy she expected. Her husband did not have a stable job, forcing her to struggle to take care of her life. They lived together for nearly 10 years. In April 2006, Jingguan finally received her residence card in Taiwan. In July, she asked for a divorce. Her second husband begged her, but Jingguan was so determined that he finally agreed to the divorce. With her skillful acupressure massage technique, Jingguan quickly found a job at a spa. Thanks to her outstanding skills, she soon became the best technician in the shop. In addition to her professional skills, Jingguan also had a business mind. After many years of accumulating capital, she boldly opened her own spa in Taichung, inheriting the massage secrets passed down from her family, combined with her skillful communication skills. Her shop grew more and more prosperous. Her success in business helped her not only become financially independent, but also have the conditions to invest in rental real estate. It was during this period of development that she met Qiyu, a young man 11 years younger than her. Despite the age gap, Jingguan was still very young and beautiful thanks to her ability to take care of herself. From Qi's frequent visits to the spa, they gradually developed feelings for each other and decided to live together. Jingguan had high hopes for this relationship. She often bragged to her friends about her young and handsome boyfriend. In order to integrate into Qi's family, she and her boyfriend went to visit his parents every week. So, in the end, Did Kwa's disappearance have anything to do with Jingguan? When the mysterious woman in red was spotted in the surveillance video, the police tried to trace her whereabouts through the area's security camera system. However, due to the limited number of cameras on the street, they could only track half of the journey before giving up. The last image they recorded was of the woman riding away on a motorbike, carrying 2 large bags of things. Not giving up, the investigators decided to watch the elevator camera footage over and over again, carefully analyzing every little detail. Their patience was rewarded when they caught an important clue in one frame. At the moment the woman in red reached out to press the elevator button, 2 of her fingers were clearly bandaged. This detail immediately caught their attention because it coincided with Jingguan's injuries to those same fingers. Looking at the large and small packages in the camera, plus the injuries on Jingguan's hands, the police had a bad feeling. Could it be that Jingguan had killed her boyfriend, dismembered him, and disguised herself to get rid of the evidence? With these suspicions, the police went to Jingguan and asked her if, on the second day after her boyfriend went missing, she had carried many bags of things into the elevator. What surprised the police was that Jingguan did not deny it but frankly admitted it. She said that she had indeed taken her luggage by elevator because she was preparing to sell her house at the time, so she used a trash bag to pack her clothes and brought them to the store, intending to stay there for a while. She also said that if they didn't believe it, she could go with them to the store to check. The police were half believing and half doubting. They followed her to the massage parlor and indeed found the bags that appeared on the camera, and they did indeed have clothes inside. However, the police still felt that something was wrong. According to statistics, a total of 11 bags appeared on the camera, but only 5 to 6 bags were found at Jingguan's massage parlor. When the police asked Jingguan about this, she seemed upset. She said that some of the bags had been opened and the items inside had been taken. She also angrily told the police not to slander her indiscriminately. However, the strange thing was that through her gestures and actions, the police could not sense any real sadness and anxiety. The police still believed in their intuition, thinking that Jingguan must have something to do with her boyfriend's disappearance. At this time, the police changed their tactics and started to comfort her with conversation. The police followed Jingguan's story and talked about her feelings for her boyfriend. Jingguan said that she really loved her boyfriend and even borrowed 10 million new Taiwan dollars, about 330,000 US dollars, to help him do business. Then they turned to talking about having children. At this moment, the police suddenly changed direction and asked, "You love him so much. Is it possible that love at its peak will turn into hatred?" Jingguan, who had just lowered her guard, was shaken by this unexpected question. Seizing the opportunity, the police continued thoughtfully. People can't disappear for no reason. Every step they take leaves traces. Sooner or later, the truth will be revealed. For the first time, Jingguan fell into a state of prolonged silence. In the tense atmosphere, the policeman gently asked, "Do you think he's still alive?" After a moment of silence, Jingguan replied in an icy voice, "Probably dead." With just that short sentence, the solid defense wall that Jingguan had built up all this time completely collapsed. And then, she confessed all her crimes. As mentioned before, after divorcing her second husband, Jingguan opened a massage parlor in Taichung. She and Kwa met at this massage parlor. First, their relationship was very good. Jingguan took great care of her boyfriend. When they first met, Kwa was not the boss but only a senior technician. Although the income was quite high, it was still very different from Jingguan's massage business. After that, Jingguan encouraged her boyfriend to start a business as a boss. In order to have the capital to start a business, she specially went to Fuin to borrow money from her father, investing 1 million new Taiwan dollars, about 33,000 US dollars, for her boyfriend. She also used her name as a guarantor, borrowing 10 million new Taiwan dollars from the bank. At that time, Kwa promised her that he would pay her 200,000 new Taiwan dollars, about 6,600 US dollars, in interest every year. But after the factory made a profit, he did not keep his promise and always found excuses to avoid it. However, Jingguan did not pay much attention at first, thinking that they would get married sooner or later anyway. However, after 6 years of being together, Jingguan discovered that her boyfriend had no intention of marrying her. As time passed, Jingguan's age began to show, making them look more and more incompatible. In addition, after becoming a boss, Kuo only focused on his career and did not care about marriage. The most important thing was that Jingguan's children from her first marriage in China now had children, which meant she was a grandmother. This made it very difficult for Kuo's family to accept her. Kuo told her that the family could not marry her for the time being and asked her to wait. But then, 2 years before the incident, Jingguan found out that she was pregnant. She was extremely happy, thinking that this time they could finally get married properly. But when Kuo heard the news, not only was he unhappy, he also asked Jingguan to have an abortion. This made Jingguan realize that her boyfriend had absolutely no intention of marrying her, but only wanted to take her body and money. Thinking about this, she felt very angry. Around March and April 2014, the two of them quarreled more often. Kuo couldn't stand Jingguan's constant urging on him to get married, so he used her job as an excuse, saying that he absolutely could not marry a woman who worked as a masseuse. Jingguan's dream of marriage was shattered once again. She felt that she had sacrificed everything for her boyfriend, taken care of him for years, been his lover, his caregiver, and lent him money for business. But in the end, she had received nothing. In frustration and anger, she made a terrible decision. On the evening of April 26, 2014, Jingguan waited for Kuo to get off work as usual. It was around 3 a.m. the next morning when he returned home, exhausted. In order to catch him off guard, Jingguan asked him if he wanted something to drink, then made him a cup of tea, secretly putting in 10 sleeping pills. After drinking it, due to fatigue and the effects of the medicine, Kuo quickly fell asleep. At this time, Jingguan took a knife from the kitchen, knelt by the bed, and in a moment of madness, swung the knife at her boyfriend's neck. In order to avoid the blood from staining the bedsheets and leaving traces, she had already spread a plastic sheet on the bed. Thus, Kuo was murdered while he was completely unprepared. After that, Jingguan dragged her boyfriend's body into the bathroom. In order to avoid leaving traces, she placed his upper body in a large plastic basin that she had prepared to let the blood drain out. Because Jingguan's father was a traditional Chinese medicine practitioner, she had a certain understanding of the structure of the human body since she was young. In addition, because she worked as a massage therapist, she was very familiar with the joints of the human body. She quickly finished dismembering the body. During this process, because her hands were tired, she had to switch between cutting hands, and as a result, she accidentally cut her finger. After finishing, Jingguan wrapped the body parts in clothes and put them in black garbage bags. Then she transported them down to the parking lot bit by bit. In order to avoid arousing suspicion, she disguised herself in many different ways when transporting the bags down. She knew for sure that the camera would record them, so to mislead the investigation, she did not bring the body every time she went down. There were a few times when the bags were just clothes. She even intentionally left a few bags at the massage parlor to make it look like she was moving house. After transporting the body to the parking lot, she drove her motorbike to transfer the bags one by one to a car that was parked in a hidden spot from the camera. Then she drove the body parts up a nearby mountain to dispose of them. To completely destroy the evidence, she poured gasoline on the body and the bloody clothes and bedding and burned them, then quickly left the scene. After finishing everything in a state of panic, and the fact that she had just learned to drive, she crashed into an electric pole on the side of the road that night. She did not dare to go home, but stayed at a hotel and hid the murder weapon used to dismember the body in a corner of the room. The next day, Jingguan felt uneasy and returned to the scene to check the situation. The result was that most of the body was still there. Therefore, she dug a shallow hole nearby, buried the remaining parts of the body, and covered it with weeds and branches. After finishing her statement, Jingguan led the police to the scene where the body was dumped. Following her instructions, the police found the burial site covered with branches. When they dug it up, they really found the remaining parts of Qin Yu's body. In addition, the police also went to the hotel where she stayed that night and found the murder weapon. At first, the police thought Jinan's motive for the crime was very clear. It was a murder for love. But through further investigation, they discovered that the emotional issue was only part of it. The other motive was a financial dispute. The police discovered that the house they were living in had a deposit paid by Jing Gwen, and the monthly installments were paid by Ku. When Jing Gwen realized that her boyfriend had no intention of getting married, she planned to sell the house and leave Taiwan. But her boyfriend said that since he had also contributed money, he wanted to split the money from the sale of the house. Jing Gwen felt extremely angry and disappointed. Her boyfriend, who had been with her for so many years, not only did not want to marry her, but also wanted to split the money from the sale of the house. To prevent the money from being divided and to get revenge, she planned this murder. It could be seen that she had been planning this for a long time. Before taking action, she still cared about Ku Yu's parents as usual, not showing any unusual signs. The police also discovered that Jingguan's driver's license had only been issued not long before the incident, and no one around her knew about it. The police believed that she had secretly learned to drive in preparation for disposing of the evidence. In addition, 2 months before the incident, she had used insomnia as an excuse to get sleeping pills from the hospital. The day before the crime, she bought a knife, a large plastic basin, a plastic sheet, and 2 10L gasoline cans. She also rented a car the day before and deliberately parked it in a place where the cameras could not see it, preparing for the next day's plan. It is noteworthy that before committing the crime, Jingguan was worried that if she killed someone and then sold the house, once the incident was discovered, the house would become a haunted house and could not be sold. Therefore, she decided to sell the house first. In fact, since March 21st, that is, before the incident occurred, she had already agreed on a price with the buyer and completed the name change procedure on April 14th. However, she planned to hand over the house after completing the plan at the end of the month. As a result, this case caused the house to become a haunted house after being transferred for a few days. Because the evidence of the case was very complete, everyone initially thought it would end quickly. But unexpectedly, during the trial, Jingguan suddenly changed her testimony. She claimed that it was self-defense that night because Ku had used a knife to slash her first, so she fought back, and she only slashed once. However, according to the prosecution's evidence, Ku had taken sleeping pills when she was murdered. Later, Jing Gwen changed her testimony, saying that she acted rashly and had no premeditated murder plan. However, a lot of evidence, such as buying the car in advance, buying the knife and the plastic sheet, all proved that she had been well prepared. Finally, she even claimed that she was mentally disordered, possessed by a ghost, and had no control over her actions when she committed the crime. However, the psychiatric examination results showed that she was completely normal. Because Jingguan's attitude in court was very arrogant and showed no intention of repenting, she was initially facing the death penalty. However, before the sentencing, her attitude suddenly changed. She began copying scriptures in prison and wrote 5 letters of repentance to the judge and the victim's family. In the letter, she specifically expressed her wish to be filial to her boyfriend's parents, hoping that they could forgive her impulsive act out of emotion, and promised to pay double the amount they demanded in compensation. The judge determined that Jing Gwen was not an irredeemable sinner. It was only because she could not effectively resolve her emotional conflicts, debts, and pregnancy that she ended up in this tragedy. The judge believed that she still had the potential to reform, so she was eventually sentenced to life in prison. When this case was first announced, public opinion generally sympathized with Jing Gwen. At that time, everyone thought that she was a victim who had been taken advantage of and abandoned by a young man, causing her to lose both her life and her property. And only when she could not force him to marry did she take extreme action. However, through in-depth investigation, the truth shows that murder for love is only part of the case. Financial dispute is her main motive. Moreover, this case was planned very carefully. This fact makes the public sympathy for her decrease significantly. Finally, the biggest controversy is about the verdict. Many people suspect that Jing Gwen copied scriptures and wrote letters of repentance just to gain mercy. Story 2. In October 2023, Wang Song, the heir of the renowned W Group in China, made headlines when the media reported his official breakup with a famous social media influencer. Shortly after, Wang Song's ex-girlfriend, Wang Yiming, publicly revealed that she had an illegitimate daughter with him. This revelation dominated search rankings for several months. Meanwhile, a Weibo post by a lawyer, buried among countless entertainment news stories, also drew significant attention. In the post, the lawyer disclosed, the brother-in-law of a billionaire was arrested for committing a homicide and is under supervised custody at a designated location. Here, the former billionaire referred to Wang Jining, the head of the Wanda Group, and the social media celebrity's uncle pointed to Wang Xiam. The arrested individual, Lin Yu, is a well-known billionaire in China who owns several multinational companies. As of the end of 2023, news of Lin Yu's arrest had not gained much public traction. However, an international media report about Chinese police being called to assist in investigating a 20-year-old murder case in Sweden caused a stir. Soon after, the phrase Lin Yu, Wang Song's uncle, suspected of murdering 2 wives, became a trending topic across major media platforms. People began to realize that this powerful billionaire was implicated in several severe criminal cases. How had he managed to evade the law for over 15 years? Let's go back to the morning of March 18, 2003, in an ordinary family home in the Hugo district, southwest of Gothenburg, the second largest city in Sweden. After breakfast, a woman named Veronica Lin, then 30 years old, took her 3-year-old son, Marcus, to daycare before heading to the campus of Chalmers University of Technology, one of Sweden's most prestigious universities. At the time, she was a student there. Born in 1973, Veronica was the second child in her family and had an older sister named Christina. From a young age, Veronica had a strong passion for East Asian culture. She had worked at a few Chinese restaurants in Gothenburg. In 1996, at the age of 23, she traveled to Dalian, China, to study, learning Chinese while teaching English part-time. During this period, she met Lin Yu, a man 10 years her senior, who was also a student in her English class. Over time, the two developed a romantic relationship. Before Christmas 1997, Veronica, still in Dalian, sent a letter home to her family, sharing that she had fallen in love with a charismatic and influential man in Dalian. It seemed that Veronica was more deeply invested in the relationship than Lin Yu. In 1998, after finishing her studies abroad, Veronica returned to Gothenburg and soon discovered she was pregnant. She shared the news with Lin Yu, who was initially very surprised but decided to take responsibility. Later, during police interrogations, Lin Yu stated, "According to Chinese customs, having a child without being married is not acceptable for Veronica, the child, and myself. I immediately went to Gothenburg. Veronica's family arranged a wedding registration at the city hall. Some reports described their relationship as a romantic cross-border love story. However, in reality, Lin Yu was known to be quite a philanderer, and without the pregnancy, he likely would never have married Veronica." Lin Yu later remarked, "At first, I really liked Veronica, but over time, I noticed her flaws. Veronica was very emotional and impulsive. We had discussed marriage before but never made a final decision. Despite this, the couple enjoyed a brief period of happiness after their wedding. Every time Lin Yu returned to Sweden, he brought gifts for Veronica's parents, ranging from exquisite Chinese porcelain to elegant leather jackets. However, the long periods of separation gradually eroded their relationship. When their son, Marcus, was born in June 1999, Lin Yu was not even present. Afterward, Veronica moved back to her parents' home with Marcus. Living with her parents, Veronica led a simple life. In the mornings, she would take Marcus to daycare, then attend her classes, and return home afterward to care for her parents and son. She usually got home around 3 o'clock or 4 p.m. Lin Yu sent about 10,000 Swedish krona, approximately $900, monthly to support Veronica and Marcus. However, over time, he became increasingly reluctant and often delayed the payments. By December 2002, Veronica requested a divorce, and Lin Yu agreed, acknowledging that their marriage had become nominal and was being maintained only for their child. However, neither of them was willing to compromise when it came to custody of Marcus. In the spring of 2003, shortly before the incident, Lin Yu sent Veronica an email with a threatening tone. "Don't push me. I love Marcus more than you do. I will come to Sweden to talk things through with you. Veronica responded, if you want to fight, go ahead. On March 18, 2003, Veronica failed to return home by the evening. Her parents went to pick up Marcus from daycare and repeatedly called her phone. Although her phone was on, no one answered. By 9 p.m., Veronica's parents reported her missing to the police, providing the following information. Veronica was 30 years old, 5 feet 6 inches tall, with shoulder-length dark brown hair. She was last seen wearing a leather jacket and a shirt. By the morning of March 19th, Veronica was still missing, leaving her parents extremely worried. During police interviews, Veronica's mother mentioned that the previous evening, she had heard several screams in the hallway. However, when she tried to follow the sound to investigate, the screaming had stopped. Fortunately, Veronica's phone was still active and could be connected. The police began using technical methods to locate the phone. On the evening of March 19th, the police traced the signal from Veronica's phone and discovered it was within the apartment complex where her family lived. However, due to the limitations of technology at the time, they couldn't pinpoint the exact unit. The police resorted to calling her phone and listening at the doors of each apartment to determine where the sound was coming from. Eventually, they found Veronica's phone in the first-floor apartment of a man named Tang Zhang. The police knocked on the door for a long time, but no one answered. Forced to break in, they were horrified by what they saw. Veronica lay collapsed in the hallway leading to the bedroom, surrounded by dark red stains. Signs of a struggle were evident on her body, and she was no longer breathing. It seemed the screams Veronica's mother had heard the previous evening were her final cries. Tang Zhang, the apartment's owner, had disappeared without a trace. However, his passport was found in the apartment, and the police released an image of it as evidence. Initially, investigators strongly suspected Tang Zhang of murdering Veronica, especially after they tracked his phone signal moving quickly toward the Swedish-Danish border. This further supported the theory that Tang Zhang was fleeing to evade justice. However, when the police followed his phone signal, they discovered it had been discarded in a trash can near the train station. Veronica's family lived on the second floor of the same building, while Tang Zhang lived on the first floor. As his name suggests, Tang Zhang was of Chinese descent. Reports indicated that his Swedish language skills were poor, whereas Veronica was fluent in both Swedish and Chinese. Occasionally, Tang Zhang had asked Veronica to help translate official letters from the local government. Veronica's parents described Tang Zhang as a seemingly gentle person who never had conflicts with neighbors, making it difficult to imagine what could have motivated him to commit such a heinous act. When asked if Veronica had conflicts with anyone else, her parents immediately mentioned her estranged husband, Liu. They explained that the couple was in the midst of a contentious divorce and had been fiercely arguing over custody of their son. Additionally, Liu, a wealthy businessman from China, would likely face the prospect of giving Veronica a significant portion of his assets if the divorce was finalized, something he was unwilling to accept. Furthermore, Liu was using his marriage to Veronica to apply for residency in Sweden. Veronica's decision to file for divorce at this time would have greatly displeased him. Hearing this, the police began investigating Liu's travel records and discovered that he was currently in Gothenburg, Sweden, staying at the Sheraton Hotel in the city. Even more surprising was that Veronica's parents had no idea Liu had come to Sweden. In the past, Liu would stay at their home when visiting. This time, however, he had secretly checked into the Sheraton Hotel. Could there be a specific reason for this unusual behavior? The police quickly arrested Liu at the Sheraton Hotel. During the interrogation, Liu expressed anger, stating that the suspicions against him were deeply upsetting. He claimed he had never anticipated such an incident and that Veronica's death caused him immense grief. Liu explained that he had not informed his in-laws about his trip to Sweden because he was traveling in Europe for business. Originally, Sweden was not part of his itinerary, but due to an urgent deal, he decided to visit Gothenburg. Since his stay was brief, he didn't want to inconvenience his in-laws. More importantly, Liu had an alibi. Veronica's time of death was estimated to be around 3:30 p.m. on March 18th, while Liu was reportedly with business partners the entire day until late at night. His defense attorney highlighted this point and argued that, given Liu's alibi, the suspicions surrounding Tang Zhong, who was on the run, seemed far more compelling. After a month of investigations and multiple hearings, Swedish prosecutors concluded that there was insufficient evidence to charge Liu, and he was released on April 25, 2003. Liu boarded a flight back to China, making any further attempts to detain him significantly more challenging. Since Veronica's death, the police had been unable to locate Tang Zhong. The company he worked for reported that he had been absent without notice since March 18th, and no one had been able to contact him. A breakthrough occurred on April 30th when a woman walking her dog near Veronica's family's apartment complex noticed her dog refusing to leave a patch of grass behind the building. The dog barked incessantly at a particular spot where the ground appeared disturbed. This area was directly below the window of Tang Zhong's apartment. Aware of the murder that had taken place in the building, the woman quickly contacted the police. Upon arrival, officers dug beneath the grass and uncovered Tang Zhong's decomposing body. It turned out that he had not fled to evade justice but had himself fallen victim to foul play. More crucially, the autopsy revealed that Tang Zhong had died on March 17th, one day before Veronica's murder. This meant he could not have been her killer. The police then re-examined Tang Zhong's apartment, the scene of Veronica's murder, and conducted forensic testing. The results showed that the red stains at the crime scene contained DNA from 3 individuals: Veronica, Tang Zhong, and an unidentified male. With suspicions about Tang Zhong eliminated, the police resumed their investigation into Liu. They returned to the Sheraton Hotel in Gothenburg, where Liu had stayed, and conducted forensic testing in his room. The results revealed that the unidentified male DNA found at the murder scene also matched DNA collected in Liu's hotel room. Years later, with the assistance of Chinese authorities, Swedish police identified the suspect. He was 37 years old at the time and named Zhang Song. Based on the available evidence, Swedish investigators theorized that Liu may have hired Zhang Song as a hitman to deal with his troublesome wife, Veronica. Killing Veronica at Chalmers University of Technology was clearly impractical, and abducting her on the way home would have attracted attention. The most feasible location for the crime was the apartment building where Veronica lived. In other words, Tang Zhong's death may have occurred because the perpetrator needed a location to kill Veronica. Tang Zhong was murdered on March 17th, and the killer dismembered him, burying the remains under the grass behind the apartment complex under the cover of darkness. The killer then used Tang Zhong's apartment as a hideout. The following day, when Veronica returned home, the perpetrator abducted her in the hallway and brought her to Tang Zhong's apartment. After killing Veronica, the perpetrator took Tang Zhong's passport and phone to fabricate the appearance of Tang fleeing to avoid responsibility for the crime, thereby framing him. As for why Zhang Song's DNA was found in Liu's hotel room, it was likely because Zhang Song met with Liu at the hotel to report the completion of his task. While staying at the hotel, Zhang Song may have been bleeding from an injury, inadvertently leaving traces of his DNA behind. On June 7, 2005, Swedish authorities issued an international warrant for Liu, initiating a nearly decade-long pursuit. However, with no extradition treaty between Sweden and China, combined with the influence of the Lin and Wang families in China, bringing Liu back to Sweden was nearly impossible. Most people might assume Liu's most significant claim to fame was being the brother-in-law of billionaire Wang Jianlin, once the richest man in China and Asia. However, Liu's true power came not from Wang Jianlin but from his father, Lin Linzhong, and his sister. Lin Yongyong was married to Wang Jinlin and was also the mother of Wang Shitsong. Though she maintained a low profile, she was far from a mere noblewoman leading an unremarkable life within a wealthy family. Yusong and Lin Yu's father, Lin Lenong, was a prominent figure in the military. Moreover, Lin Linjiang was not a rags-to-riches soldier who climbed the ranks through perseverance. Instead, he was born into immense wealth. Lin Linjiang's father, Yong, and Lin Yu's grandfather, was a well-known merchant in Lin Awang Longo County, Xinghai City, Hab Province, China. By the time Lin Linjiang was born, his family was already one of the most influential forces in Lijiawang. The grandfather initially intended for Lin Linjiang to study business and manage the family's assets. But Lin Linjiang was determined to pursue a military career. Later, Yong inherited her grandfather's business acumen. In 1994, she founded Linchier Investment Group, a conglomerate with interests in construction, food services, and entertainment. In March 2014, Yong joined the board of directors of the Wanda Group. Rumors circulated on Chinese social media that when Wanda faced a debt crisis in 2017, Yong contributed 200 billion yuan to rescue the company. In 2005, after Swedish police issued an international warrant for Linnu, they initiated procedures to travel to Dalian, China, to gather additional evidence. During this trip, Swedish authorities met with Liu's personal assistant. Lai Ling had been responsible for booking Liu's flight to Sweden and organizing his itinerary during his stay there. Swedish police suspected that Lai Ling might know the real purpose behind Liu's trip to Sweden. They urged her to share any relevant information and warned her that her situation could become dangerous. However, Lin Ling appeared indifferent to their warnings and was unwilling to cooperate with the investigation. Years later, Lai Ling became Liu's second wife, unaware that she was walking into the doorway of death. In February 2014, a user named Uncle Bluebeard posted an article titled, "Even the Wealthy Face Risks. My sister died on Koh Samui Island, Thailand on the Tianya Forum," which quickly gained widespread attention. Although the original post was deleted, screenshots of it remain available online. The author described how her sister-in-law's younger sister was incredibly beautiful and had been married to one of China's wealthiest men for over 15 years. The post alleged that the sister was strangled to death by her husband abroad and thrown into a swimming pool to stage it as a drowning accident. The husband was reportedly arrested by foreign police and later paid a large sum to be released on bail. The article referred to the husband as L and claimed that he controlled all of his wife's finances. The sister-in-law had once bought an apartment for her parents, registered in her name. However, after her death, L allegedly changed the locks on the apartment, leaving her parents with nowhere to go. Although the article did not explicitly name anyone, internet users, displaying a Sherlock Holmes-like knack for investigation, unearthed a 2013 Thai media report. The report revealed that a Chinese woman named Lai Ling had drowned at a villa on Koh Samui Island, Thailand. Lin Ling's family expressed suspicions about her death, believing that she had been murdered by her husband, Lenyu. According to related reports, Lenyu and Lin Ling had traveled to their private villa on Koh Samui Island for a vacation in January 2013. On the morning of January 18th, Liu frantically sought out the villa's management, claiming that his wife had drowned in the swimming pool the previous night. He explained that he had gone to bed early and discovered her floating in the pool when he woke up in the morning. The villa staff alerted the local police, who arrived to find Liu holding his wife's cold body by the pool. It was later determined that Lai Ling had been dead for at least 8 to 10 hours before her body was discovered. What raised suspicion was the discovery of scratches on Lin Yu's left shoulder, which appeared to be fresh nail marks, suggesting he had been involved in a struggle. Additionally, Liu waited until January 20th, 2 days after the incident, to call Lin Ling's parents in China and inform them of their daughter's sudden death. During the autopsy, the forensic doctor discovered clear bruising on Lin Ling's neck caused by forceful strangulation, confirming that she had been murdered. The cause of death was determined to be asphyxiation due to pressure on the neck. The crime scene was a private villa at the Estate Samui on Koh Samui Island. A 2011 article revealed that Lenyu had purchased this villa in 2008 during a trip to Thailand. In 2013, a Chinese-language newspaper in Thailand, Jingju Zhongyuan, reported on Lin Ling's case. However, due to the significant influence of the Lai and Wang families at the time, all names in the articles were replaced with pseudonyms. Lin Ling was referred to as Julie, and her sister, the writer of the Weibo post mentioned earlier, was also anonymized. Later, Lai Ling's brother-in-law publicly shared more details about the events online. He explained that Lin Ling had been extremely close to her parents and, as the youngest child, had been cherished by them from a young age. No matter where she went, Lin Ling would call or message her parents daily. However, starting on January 18th, Lai Ling's parents could no longer reach her. It wasn't until January 20th that they received a call from Lenyu. Lai Ling, who didn't know how to swim, would never have gone swimming alone in the middle of the night. Their villa on Koh Samui was an ultra-luxurious 4-star resort. Lai Ling's parents had visited the property many times, as had her sister's family. The resort featured strict security measures, making it highly unlikely for an accidental drowning to occur, especially in the family's private pool. Liu claimed that on the night of January 17th, after drinking heavily, he had fallen asleep, only to find Lai Ling drowned in the morning. He added that Lin Ling rarely drank, but she may have had a little that evening. Despite the many doubts surrounding the case, Lai Ling's parents initially chose to believe their son-in-law and began arranging for Lin Ling's body to be transported back to China. On January 22nd, the Liaoning Provincial Police Bureau contacted Lai Ling's father to inquire if the family was aware of her accident in Thailand. When they confirmed they were aware, the police advised them that preserving Lin Ling's body was crucial for any future investigation. Thai police had preliminarily classified the case as a deliberate homicide. At this point, Lin Ling's parents were utterly shocked. They immediately traveled to Thailand to review the forensic report. For years after Lai Ling's death, they tirelessly sought justice for their daughter. Initially, under pressure from Lai Ling's parents, Thai authorities arrested Liu. A special investigation committee was established to handle the case. However, it appears that Liu used his financial influence to disrupt the investigation, which was subsequently halted by an official suspension order. Lai Ling's family refused to give up and continued to file lawsuits with the Koh Samui court, which accepted their case. The court issued an arrest warrant for Lenyu, but after paying substantial bail, Lenyu was released. He was supposed to remain in the country while out on bail, but for reasons unclear, Lenyu managed to return to China. In November 2014, Liu entered the United Kingdom using a passport under his own name. The UK's facial recognition system flagged him as an internationally wanted fugitive. The United Kingdom, having an extradition treaty with Sweden, promptly arrested Lenyu and extradited him to Gothenburg, Sweden. In January 2016, Swedish prosecutors charged Lenyu with 2 counts of incitement to commit murder. Although there was evidence that Lenyu was not present at the scene when Veronica was killed, the prosecution argued that he had hired someone to murder both Veronica and Tang Zhang. During the trial, Lenyu argued that he had never met Tang Zhang, did not know he lived on the first floor of Veronica's apartment building, and could not have ordered any actions involving him. However, Veronica's father testified that Lenyu had met Tang Zhang several times while staying at their home in Sweden. Another Chinese individual who had previously lived with Tang Zhang also confirmed that Lenyu had interacted with both of them. After multiple hearings and testimonies from over 40 witnesses, the jury unanimously concluded that Lenyu had orchestrated Veronica's murder. The most compelling evidence was Zhang Song's DNA found in the hotel room where Liu stayed. Liu was sentenced to life imprisonment, as Sweden does not have the death penalty, the harshest punishment available under Swedish law. However, the jury also determined that there was insufficient evidence to prove Liu had orchestrated Tang Zhang's murder. They speculated that Tang Zhang's death might not have been part of Liu's plan. Following the life sentence, Liu's legal team was left stunned. He had spent a significant sum of money hiring 3 defense lawyers, who worked tirelessly to find a way to appeal the decision. Soon, they found an opportunity. The lawyers discovered that a jury member had previously posted extreme anti-Chinese statements on Twitter, suggesting potential bias. According to legal regulations, this rendered the verdict invalid. The case was remanded to a lower court for a retrial with a new judge and jury. What happened next was unexpected. With the same evidence and documentation, the new jury concluded that there was insufficient evidence linking Liu to Veronica's murder. He was declared not guilty. The court reasoned that the DNA evidence only established a connection between Lenyu and Zhang Song, who was present in the apartment where the murder occurred, but did not prove Lenyu had hired Zhang Song to kill his wife. Furthermore, there was not enough evidence to confirm Zhang Song himself was the perpetrator. In response to the verdict, both the Swedish prosecution and Lenyu filed appeals. The prosecution sought to continue holding Lenyu criminally accountable, while Liu's reason for appealing surprised many. Upon being declared not guilty, the court awarded him 4.1 million Swedish krona to cover his legal expenses. However, Liu argued that this amount was insufficient. He claimed that his legal team had hired investigators and translated investigative documents into Chinese, raising the total cost of legal and investigative fees to at least 7.5 million Swedish krona. Despite these appeals, no further action was taken, as Liu swiftly returned to China. After his return, in May and September 2017, Len Yu established two companies, Xinu Investment Corporation in Shenzhen and Tang Shiga Biotechnology Company in Dalian. These companies focused on biosciences and pharmaceuticals. In 2018, the Xina Cell Bank was inaugurated, along with the Xina Life Sciences Industrial Park in Dalian. Reports indicated that Xina's ambitious goal was to create a personal cell bank for every citizen in China. In an interview, Liu stated that he adhered to the business philosophy of Anamur Kazuo, which emphasizes reverence for nature and compassion for people, valuing ethics and love for humanity. Watching the interview video, it would be hard to imagine that Len Yu had been implicated in multiple serious criminal cases. Beyond cell storage, Xinu focused on innovative cell science research. At the 2018 Dawn International Life Sciences Conference, Liu delivered a speech and presented a video of his daughter. He revealed that his daughter had been born with a genetic defect. On her 4th birthday the previous year, she was still unable to walk. However, thanks to Xina's products, she was now healthy and active. By this timeline, Len Yu's daughter was born around 2013, shortly after the death of his second wife. Lin Ling. This suggests that Liu quickly married a third wife, which led many to revisit and scrutinize his past. In Veronica's case, a key figure was Zhang Song, who had been linked to both the crime scene and Lyu's hotel room. It was believed that finding Zhang Song could provide crucial leads. However, in October 2015, Swedish police inquired with Chinese authorities about Zhang Song's whereabouts, only to be told that he had been missing for years. In 2021, Sweden's SVT television network aired a 6-part documentary titled Veronica and the Chinese Millionaire, which detailed the case and trial, sparking widespread discussion in Sweden. The documentary featured interviews with Lyu's son, Marcus, as well as Veronica's father, sister, and close friends. After Veronica's death, Marcus lived with his maternal grandparents and never saw his father Lin Yu or his paternal grandparents. In China, again, initially his grandparents told him that his parents had died in a car accident. However, when he was 7 years old, Marcus stumbled upon a videotape at home and saw news reports suggesting his father might have been involved in his mother's death. The truth was devastating for him. Fortunately, his grandparents raised him well. In the documentary, Marcus revealed that he had once tried to contact his father. He wrote a letter to Liu through a Chinese journalist, sending it to the headquarters of Jinergu. In the letter, Marcus wrote, "Dear father, this is not an easy letter to write. I am your son, but we have not seen each other for a very long time. About you, I have only a few childhood memories. Over the years, I've heard many things about you from others, like how you are kind, generous, and talented, but I've also heard disturbing stories about terrible actions attributed to you. I hope to form my own understanding of you. I want to know what happened between you and my mother. What do you think of me as your son? Do you still have any fatherly love for me, or am I just someone you don't want to acknowledge?" Despite sending the letter, Marcus did not receive a response. It's possible that Liu never saw the letter due to some misunderstanding, or perhaps he wasn't ready to confront Marcus. In August 2024, Sweden's SVT television reported that Len Yu had been arrested in China on suspicion of murder. However, Chinese authorities have not yet released further details about his arrest after more than 20 years as a fugitive. Lyu's sudden capture raises questions. Does this signal the unveiling of more hidden secrets or the downfall of a once powerful figure? We can only wait for official reports. According to Hong Kong news. Many legal experts believe that Liyu's arrest in China after 21 years suggests he is likely to face trial there. The chances of extradition to Sweden are considered very low. The trial will face several challenges, including the legality of evidence, the defendant's right to a fair defense, and the complexities of international legal cooperation under Chinese law. If the evidence is conclusive, Liu could be sentenced to life imprisonment or even the death penalty, depending on the severity of the crime. If the evidence is insufficient, he could be acquitted and released. This brings today's case to an end. This case reminds us that no matter how much time has passed or how difficult a case may seem, the dignity of the law and the pursuit of justice must never be compromised. Story 3. This case took place in a residential area on Xintai Road in the Xinjiang district of New Taipei City, Taiwan on April 17, 2008. A high school student named Pinghua returned home from school as usual. As soon as she stepped inside, she immediately sensed something was wrong. Her mother wasn't there to greet her as usual, and the house was eerily quiet. Pinghua began to feel uneasy. She called out for her mother several times but received no response. She walked to her mother's room and gently pushed open the door. What she saw was a horrifying scene that would likely haunt her forever. Her mother was bound hand and foot with tape, lying face down naked on the bed with blood stains all over the mattress. Fighting back her fear and grief, Pinghua shakily called the police. Upon receiving the report, police and emergency personnel quickly arrived at the scene. After an initial examination, they confirmed that Pinghua's mother had been brutally murdered. There was a deep wound on her neck, clearly indicating death by throat cutting. The police immediately secured the crime scene and began a thorough investigation. At the scene, they discovered a fruit knife and scissors, suspected to be the murder weapons. The room showed signs of being searched. Police initially believed this might be a robbery-murder case. They theorized that a thief had broken in when no one was home, unexpectedly encountering the homeowner returning early. When confronted with the sudden appearance of the homeowner, the thief might have panicked and committed the brutal murder. Additionally, given the victim's naked state, police suspected she might have been sexually assaulted before for death. However, specific details would have to wait for the forensic report. The victim, Yapong, was 46 years old and had previously run a coffee wholesale business with her husband. Their marriage had been harmonious, but tragically her husband had died of a heart attack 3 years earlier. For Khan, this was a devastating blow. After her husband's death, she lost her support system and the coffee business had to cease operations. Fortunately, thanks to savings from their previous business, Kong was able to maintain a living and raise her 2 daughters alone. At the time of the incident, her older daughter was studying at university in G, while her younger daughter Pinghua lived with her. The forensic report soon arrived. It revealed that the victim had 23 knife wounds from her chin to neck, with the fatal wound being a 2.4 in deep cut that caused severe bleeding. The victim ultimately died from excessive blood loss and respiratory failure. Additionally, forensics discovered a curved mark on Wang's left cheek, suggesting this was a fingernail mark left when the killer pressed their hand against her face. There was also minor bleeding under her scalp, indicating her head had been struck. Notably, semen was found in the victim's body. Police initially thought this was a robbery homicide, but further investigation made this scenario unlikely. First, there were no signs of forced entry on the windows or doors of the victim's home. Second, the family dog hadn't barked at the time of the incident, suggesting the killer was someone familiar to the victim. While the scene showed signs of being searched, the mobile phone and loose cash on the table weren't taken. Most importantly, the residential area where the victim lived. Had strict security measures. The complex had a large iron gate, but for convenience only a side gate was used for resident access. Additionally, security guards were on duty 24/7 and all visitors had to register. These circumstances made police suspect the crime was likely committed by someone the victim knew. Therefore, police immediately went to the security office to check the visitor log and surveillance footage from that day. Indeed, through the surveillance cameras, they spotted a suspicious man. The footage showed that at 1:51 p.m. that day, a man wearing a black shirt and baseball cap, head down, while on his phone, had taken advantage of the security guard's momentary inattention to slip into the complex with other residents. 2 minutes later, this man entered the elevator and quickly turned to press the button for the 6th floor, the floor where Tuing lived. Unfortunately, because he was wearing a cap, the cameras couldn't capture his face. At 5:29 p.m., the man left the complex carrying a white plastic bag. This timing coincided with when Yu Eng was murdered. Police immediately made this person their primary suspect. To further identify the suspect, police called in the victim's daughter Pinghua to review the surveillance footage. Surprisingly, as soon as she saw the images, Pinghua immediately recognized the man as Uncle Gon, someone they knew well. Pinghua revealed to police that they had been neighbors with Uncle Gon, and since her father's death, he had frequently visited her mother and shown great concern for both her and her sister. Based on Pinggu's description, police quickly identified the suspect. The suspect was Ly Gon, 45 years old, married with 2 children. His main business was in mainland China, so he frequently traveled between Taiwan and China. Initially, police worried he might have already left Taiwan, but after checking immigration records, they discovered he was still in the country. Therefore, the police's primary task was to quickly locate Jishan. Initially, police thought they could quickly determine John's location through phone tracking, but Gon seemed well-versed in police surveillance techniques. His phone would turn on and off intermittently, making it difficult to pinpoint his location. Even when Gon's phone occasionally turned on, it appeared to be deliberately misleading police tracking efforts. In fact, after the murder, Gizhan had been continuously hiding in various locations around Taipei. After the incident, Gon's phone signal first appeared in the Sanong area. Police immediately investigated, but by the time they arrived, the signal had moved to Jinan. At Jan's house, police rushed to Jan's home in Jinan, but were again too late, as Jan had already fled. At Gon's house, police found blood-stained clothes he had changed out of. At this point, police were certain Gizhan was the murderer. When questioning Jan's wife, police received an important lead. During his escape, Jishan had sent a lengthy text message to his wife explaining the incident. In the message to his wife, Jishan admitted to having an affair with He Kong, the victim. He claimed that Kong had been pressuring him to divorce his wife and frequently sent him inappropriate videos. He wanted to end the relationship, but she refused. In the message, he mentioned that the day before the incident, when he turned to Taiwan from China, he had tried to end things peacefully with Kong, but couldn't convince her. Instead, Kong threatened him to come to her house at 11 a.m. the next day, or there would be consequences. Gizhan said that when their negotiation failed again the next afternoon, Kong threatened to never let his family live in peace. In a moment of lost control, Gon punched her. Then Kong suddenly clutched her chest painfully, saying she was having a heart attack and asking Gizhan to get her medicine, but Gizhan thought Kong was just acting to gain sympathy, so he took no action. However, the situation suddenly deteriorated when Kong unexpectedly collapsed on the floor motionless. Jishan quickly checked but found Kong had stopped breathing. At that moment, he realized Kong might have actually died. from heart disease, however, because the residential complex had surveillance cameras everywhere. He knew Kwang's death would definitely be linked to him, so he devised a plan to stage the scene as a robbery murder. He first used tape to bind Kwang's hands and feet, then took a knife and cut her throat. Because the knife was dull, it only caused some small wounds, but then he discovered Kwang wasn't dead and had awakened from the pain of the knife wounds. After waking up, Kwang began screaming loudly, so in panic, Gon stabbed her multiple times. After reading Gon's message to his wife, police weren't entirely convinced of its truthfulness. The urgent task remained finding Gizhan, because his phone signal kept changing locations. Police were constantly being around to ensure Jan's phone stayed on so they could accurately determine his location. Police employed a strategy of having the victim's daughter Pingo send him messages in a gentle tone. Surprisingly, Gon responded to Pingo messages. He replied, "It's too late now to apologize to Kong and her children. I will pay with my life. Give me a few days, no need to wait for legal punishment. I will pay with my life." But then his tone changed. "That day your mother said you had grown up and were very good, ranking in the top 15 of your school. I hope you two sisters will support each other. Don't let your mother down. I have nothing more to say." Pingo was very angry when she saw such a response. She didn't understand what Gizhan meant. He was a murderer, yet was advising the sisters to support each other. Was he trying to comfort them? However, to encourage Gizhan to surrender voluntarily, Pingo suppressed her anger and continued messaging him, "Uncle, you need to give us an explanation. You can't just kill someone and then tell us to support each other and think that's enough. That doesn't help. We're all waiting for your explanation. Please, can you appear quickly? Tomorrow is Mother's funeral. I want to resolve this quickly so Mother can rest in peace." Jishan then sent Pingo a message explaining what had happened. In the message to Pingo, he wrote, "I'm truly sorry. I really didn't mean to. At that time I should have been calmer, should have gone to save your mother. What I'm telling you now is true. I have no reason to lie to you. Last year, around May or June, I gave your mother $600,000 new Taiwan dollars, approximately $20,000, to invest in a fund recently. Because I was facing some financial difficulties, I asked your mother to sell the fund so I could use the capital. She agreed. I came back to Taiwan on Wednesday, and when I went to your house, your mother told me she had sold the fund a few days before and received the money. When I came to your house the next day, your mother suddenly said the money was gone and threw her bank book at me. To see, in anger, I punched her in the back. Then she screamed about having a heart attack and asked me to get medicine, but I thought she was just pretending, so I didn't pay attention." The subsequent description of events by Jishan basically matched what he had told his wife earlier. The main difference between his explanations to his wife and Pinghua was the motive for the crime. In his explanation to Pinghua, the reason was that Chifeng had spent the money he urgently needed, causing him to angrily strike her. But in the message to his wife, he said it was because Chifeng had been pursuing him and pressuring him to divorce, causing him to lose control and punch her. Police currently found it difficult to judge the truthfulness of these two messages. However, in both messages, Jishan mentioned that he had returned to Taiwan from China the day before the incident, April 16th. Police then extracted surveillance footage from April 16th and discovered that Gizhan had indeed returned from China that day and gone straight to the victim's home. However, on the way, Gizhan had stopped at a supermarket and bought a roll of tape before going to Qing's house. Shockingly, this roll of tape matched exactly with the tape used to bind the victim. This important discovery led police to suspect that Gon's actions were not a momentary loss of control but had been premeditated, completely contradicting what he had described in his previous Messages at this point, the detective in charge of the case directly messaged Gon, urging him to surrender, mentioning that cooperating with police now might give him a chance for a reduced sentence. However, Gizhan Arli replied that he worked in telecommunications and the police couldn't easily catch him. He even boastfully declared that in a few days he would openly board a plane and leave the country. Actually, through these message exchanges, police had detected that Gon's phone signal frequently appeared in the Joey area of Elon. Police quickly went to Elon and upon arrival split into multiple teams. One team investigated hotels in Elon while others maintained 24-hour surveillance at train stations and major intersections in Yosi to prevent the suspect from escaping. However, after several days, the police search in Elon showed no progress, just as police were beginning to doubt whether Gizhan was still in G. The case had an important breakthrough that day. Police spotted a man buying cigarettes in a convenience store whose appearance closely matched suspect. Gon police approached to inquire and asked the man for identification. The man insisted he wasn't Gon but rather Jan's brother and produced his driver's license. Police carefully examined the ID the man provided. The more they looked, the more they felt the photo on it didn't match the man before them. Instead, the man's appearance was very similar to the suspect Jishan they were seeking. However, unable to completely confirm the man's identity, police hadn't taken any forceful measures at this point. The man requested to use the bathroom room since they hadn't confirmed his identity. Police couldn't let him leave like that, so they assigned 2 officers to accompany him to a nearby store to use their bathroom. On the way to the bathroom, the man suddenly stopped, saying he had something important to report directly to the team leader. The team leader was in a police car nearby. After the man was brought to the car, the team leader directly asked, "You are Gon, aren't you?" At this point, the man no longer tried to hide and directly admitted yes. Subsequent, Gon was taken by police to the hotel where he was staying for a search. At the hotel, police found the victim Ch Fang's identification documents, bank book, and bank cards. Knowing he could no longer escape, Gizhan revealed the whole truth about his complicated relationship with Ch Fang. It turned out that Jishan and Yifang had known each other many years before. At that time, Jan was serving in the military in Kimin while Chong was working at an ice cream shop. Because of her beauty, she was admired by many soldiers stationed there. Among them was Gon, who had pursued Ch Fang passionately and confessed his feelings multiple times but was always rejected. Later, Gizhan completed his military service and they lost contact as time passed. They both married and had their own families. However, after all those years, Jan's feelings for Chong had never faded. Surprisingly, Jishan learned through inquiries that Ch Fang had bought a small villa by the beach in Jinan. Actually, Ch Fang and her family normally lived in Xinjiang district, New Tape City, where the murder occurred. The villa in Jichen was really just a place for CHFO and her family to rest during holidays, to get close to the woman he had secretly loved for years. Gon bought a villa opposite Ch Fang's house, living near his dream woman. His purpose was to create accidental encounters. In 2002-2003, Gon moved into his new house in Jin Shan with a calculated plan. Day after day, he patiently waited for seemingly chance encounters with Ch Fang. Fate seemed to smile on Jan's schemes when Chong couldn't hide her surprise and emotion at meeting an old acquaintance. After so many years, now become her neighbor. From casual social conversations, they gradually became closer. Gon, though married, deliberately kept this secret and once again devoted himself to pursuing the woman who had rejected him in the past. At that time, happiness was still smiling on Ch Fang's small family. Her marital relationship was still as beautiful as in the early Days so she firmly rejected all of Gon's romantic advances, but then fate turned cruel when in 2005 CH Fong's husband suddenly passed away from a heart attack. The pain of losing her life partner shattered her spirit, and the following days were immersed in grief and loneliness. The seaside villa in Gonsha, once witness to her small family's happy moments, now only held sad memories. Jishan saw an opportunity in CH Fong's pain. He understood this was when she was at her most vulnerable and lonely, and with the sophistication of a predator, Gon gradually worked his way into CH Fong's broken heart. However, Gizhan always hid from CH Fong that he was married to his wife. He lied that he needed to work in China since Gon frequently did business in China. His wife was used to this and didn't ask many questions. Subsequently, Gon and Chong began a passionate affair. Jishan often stayed overnight at CH Fong's home, and CH Fong's daughters also knew Gon, affectionately calling him Uncle Gizhan during their relationship, because Gon's business and wasn't going well and frequently suffered losses. He continuously borrowed money from Chong to cover capital shortfalls. However, when the company was profitable, he did once give Chong $600,000 new Taiwan dollars, approximately $20,000 US, to invest in a fund, but such situations were rare. Most often he was borrowing money from Chong. As time passed, due to Jan's constant demands for money from CH Fong, their relationship began to show cracks. During one argument, Jishan accidentally revealed that he was married. Chong couldn't accept becoming the other woman and decided to end the relationship with Gon, demanding he repay the money he had borrowed previously. However, Chong never received any money back from Gizhan. Meanwhile, Jishan didn't want to break up with CHF to escape Jan's harassment. Chong stopped answering any of his calls or messages. Unexpectedly, Jishan directly returned from China to Taiwan, went to CH Fong's residential complex, and stood below her floor, sending threatening messages: either let me come up or I'll go find your daughter. You choose. If you don't see your daughter for a few days, that's my doing. Faced with such threats, Chong was forced to give in and let Jishan up. In the end, they didn't successfully break up, but reconciled instead. However, TR Phone set one condition: Gon had to divorce his wife. She believed this was the only way they could have a long-term future together. Although Gon outwardly agreed to this demand, he took no actual steps to follow through later, because Gon's business in China needed a large amount of capital. He asked Chong to sell the 600,000 new Taiwan dollar investment fund to resolve his company's urgent financial difficulties. Chong agreed at the time. On the afternoon of April 16, 2008, one day before the murder, Gizhan specifically returned to Taiwan from China with the purpose of reclaiming the 600,000 new Taiwan dollar from Chong. That day, he first stopped at a supermarket to buy tape, then went to CH Fong's residential complex. Gon explained to police that he bought the tape because Chong had special preferences, and the tape was just to add excitement. That evening, they used the tape at CH Fong's home. After finishing, Gon brought up the money issue, and Chong said they would discuss it the next day. The next day, the day of the murder, around 1 p.m., Gon came to CH Fong's home. They had intimate relations again afterward. When Gon brought up the money again, Chong suddenly said the money was all spent. Upon hearing this, Jishan lost control and had a violent argument with CHFO. What happened afterward matched what Jishan had described in his messages to his wife and Pingua. He thought Chong had died from a heart condition, so he deliberately staged the scene to look like a robbery murder. However, during the initial trial, Gon suddenly changed his previous testimony in court. Gizhan said that CH Fong had actually committed suicide. He claimed that day, while arguing with CH Fong, she suddenly lost emotional control, ran to the kitchen and grabbed a fruit knife and Scissors then in an extremely agitated state. Ch Fong used the scissors to stab her own neck. Jishan said he had rushed to press his hand against the wound, but Chon gradually lost her breath and heartbeat. Jishan said he was very frightened then, knowing that Ch Fong's death in his presence would not only implicate him in the case but would also leave her two daughters without support. Therefore, he decided to stage the scene as a robbery murder. This way, at least Ch Fong's daughters could receive their mother's insurance money. However, Jan's latest testimony completely contradicted the forensic report. According to the examination report, the fatal neck wound on Chon was 2.4 in deep and 1.2 in wide. Meanwhile, the scissors found at the scene were double-bladed with plastic coating with a maximum width of only 0.8. And therefore, this fatal wound clearly couldn't have been caused by the scissors. Furthermore, the bleeding under Ch Fong's scalp was consistent with Gan's earlier testimony about punching her and causing her to fall unconscious. Additionally, the fingernail mark on Ch Fong's cheek led forensics to speculate that this mark could have been made when Gan pressed her head down as she regained consciousness and struggled while he was cutting her throat. Based on this collective evidence, the judge didn't believe testimony but rather believed Jan's earlier confession that he had knocked Chong unconscious with his fist, then bound her with tape and killed her. The judge also pointed out that the defendant and Chan were lovers at the time. If the defendant had no intention to kill when Ch regained consciousness, he should have immediately untied her and taken her to the hospital. That would have been a normal reaction. Moreover, regarding the defendant's defense that he did this so Ch Fong's two daughters could receive insurance money, the judge said how could someone willingly bear the serious crime of murder for two people unrelated to him? After committing such a serious crime, the defendant should have shown remorse, apologized to the victim, begged for forgiveness, and accepted legal punishment. However, the defendant instead tried to fabricate a story about insurance money to rationalize his actions. Such a defense was clearly unreasonable and also showed he had no intention of repenting. Finally, the judge sentenced Lin Gizhan to life imprisonment. Gan was dissatisfied with the sentence and appealed, but the Supreme Court rejected his appeal. Story 4. Keep it simple and follow your heart. This is a beautiful line from her social media profile. She was a young, beautiful, and optimistic international student who had just graduated from the University of Technology, Sydney. She had secured her dream job and was brimming with hope for the future. However, it seemed that fate had played a cruel trick on her just as her life was about to open a new chapter. A silent nightmare descended and she vanished from this world without a trace. Today we will uncover the tragic case of a Chinese international student who was murdered in Australia. This case shocked the entire Chinese community in Australia, leaving everyone heartbroken, who ultimately took the vibrant life of this young woman. To find out, let us turn back time to 2016 and examine the details of the case. Australia is an enormous country, yet its population is just under 27 million. For this reason, Australia is very welcoming to immigrants. For many years, Australia has attracted immigrants from all over the world, including a large number of international students. Many Chinese students choose Australia as their study destination. The story we discuss today took place in New South Wales, home to the city of Sea. The protagonist of this story is Michelle Lang, who came from Sichuan, China. With her outstanding academic performance, she studied at the University of Technology, Sydney, and had just graduated. Michelle was born in 1991 in Chingu, Sichuan. As the only child in a loving family, her parents cherished her dearly and the three lived in harmony. Michelle had an outgoing and cheerful personality, and she was always well liked by her friends often. Surrounded by a lively group, she excelled academically from a young age and was a favorite among her teachers. In 2008, Michelle was about to finish her final year of high school, preparing for a crucial milestone in her life, the college entrance exams. With her excellent academic record, she had been studying diligently for a long time and felt confident about the exams. However, an unexpected disaster struck. The 2008 Sichuan earthquake. This catastrophic event tore many families apart. Tragically, Michelle's father lost his life in the earthquake. Despite her profound grief, she persevered, focused on her studies, and successfully completed the college entrance exams, gaining admission to Sichuan University, a prestigious institution majoring in broadcasting and television. Michelle's mother was immensely proud of her daughter, who had become her sole hope for the future. Throughout her university years, Michelle continued to study hard and excel. She also aspired to study abroad. At first, her mother was hesitant about the idea. After all, there were just the two of them left, and moving overseas would mean seeing each other even less often. Yet she ultimately decided to support her daughter's dream. They chose Australia as the destination for Michelle's studies. One of the reasons for selecting Australia was that Michelle's aunt was already living there. In the eyes of many families in China, having a relative in a foreign country provides some comfort and support, especially for a young woman navigating life in an unfamiliar place. In 2011, Michelle left her mother to study abroad. In Australia, she enrolled in the Hospitality Management program at the University of Technology, Sydney, and lived with her aunt. The house was located in Campie, New South Wales, just over 6 miles from downtown Sydney. The area had numerous Chinese supermarkets and restaurants, offering great convenience for everyday life with easy access to work and school in Sydney. Here, let's briefly introduce her aunt's family. Michelle's Aunt Zhang did not live alone. She was married to Derek Barrett, who was just 2 years older than Michelle and had 2 children from a previous marriage. They had only recently gotten married, and Michelle had even attended their wedding, contributing to the ceremony's expenses. So the 5 of them lived together harmoniously under one roof. Despite living in a foreign country, Michelle's optimistic personality helped her quickly adapt to life in Australia, and she developed strong friendships over the following years. Michelle excelled in her studies and achieved outstanding academic results. She frequently shared joyful moments on social media, posting photos of food and happy memories, which showed how much she enjoyed her life. Their time flew by, and in 2015, Michelle graduated from the University of Technology, Sydney. She wanted to work in Australia for a few years before planning her next steps. She had discussed this decision with her mother while she was still a student. To support Michelle's future, her mother sold a house and borrowed additional money from relatives to purchase a property. In April 2014, the house located in Campie was valued at $700,000 Australian dollars. Of course, they had only paid the down payment at that time to live together and provide mutual care. Michelle's aunt and her family of 4 moved into the new house as well. Michelle quickly secured a job as an assistant for an IELTS instructor. Everything seemed to be going well, and Michelle felt hopeful about her future. However, on April 2nd, 2016, something unexpected happened. A few of Michelle Lang's friends were unable to reach her. She wasn't answering phone calls or responding to messages, which was completely out of character. Michelle's and also tried to contact her, but had no success. At the time, her aunt was working in Wollongong, about 25 miles away, which required a 1-hour train ride. Although a bit worried, her aunt assumed that Michelle might have gone with friends to the Blue Mountains to see the autumn foliage, as if was a public holiday in Australia given the poor cell phone signal in that area. No one thought too much of it at first. It wasn't until 10:40 a.m. on April 24th, 2 days later, that a tourist near the mouth of Snapper Point in Central Coast Newcastle spotted something floating in the water that resembled a human body and alerted the police. After receiving the report, the police immediately arrived at the scene and retrieved the body from the water. It was identified as the body of a young woman wrapped in a plastic bag, estimated to be between 20 and 30 years old, with black hair. The victim had dozens of stab wounds with fatal injuries to her neck. There were also signs that her wrists and ankles had been bound with rope. The estimated time of death was around 48 hours. Prior initial assessments indicated that this was a deliberate murder, with the perpetrator intentionally dumping the body at this location. No evidence of contact with rocks was found on the body, leading authorities to believe that this was not the primary crime scene. Unfortunately, due to prolonged submersion in water, many critical clues were destroyed and no fingerprints or other evidence of the perpetrator could be recovered. Additionally, the victim's face was severely damaged, making it impossible to determine her identity. To solve the case quickly, the police used computer software to reconstruct the victim's facial features and release the image, hoping the public would come forward with any information. On the afternoon of April 25th, Michelle's aunt and uncle reported to the police that their niece had been missing for 3 days and asked for help locating her. The police suspected that the victim found the previous day might be Michelle. However, because the victim's face was severely disfigured and she was found unclothed with no clear identifying marks, identification was difficult. The police decided to compare DNA samples. They collected Michelle's personal items such as a toothbrush, hairbrush, and other belongings on April 26th. While the initial DNA results were still pending, the search for Michelle intensified. Many of her classmates and friends began posting about her disappearance online, especially the friend who had seen her. On the afternoon of April 21st, the Chinese community in Australia was also deeply shaken, and widespread concern grew for Michelle's safety after several agonizing days of waiting. At 8 a.m. on April 29th, the police finally announced the DNA comparison results. The victim found at Central Coast was indeed Michelle, the young woman everyone had been desperately searching for. Upon hearing the news, Michelle's mother collapsed in grief. Having already endured the loss of her husband, she now faced the devastating reality of losing her beloved daughter who had just stepped into adulthood. The question remained on everyone's mind: who could commit such a cruel act? Michelle had always lived harmoniously with her aunt's family, and there had never been any reported conflicts. Thus, at first, her relatives were not considered suspicious. Michelle's aunt told police that on April 21st, Michelle had been out all day, and everything seemed normal when she returned home that afternoon. Her last known contact with the outside world was at midnight on April 21st during a conversation with her ELTS teacher. After that, she completely lost contact, leading police to believe she was likely murdered on April 22nd. Could it be that someone had followed her during the day on April 21st, leading to her tragic death? The police decided to reconstruct Michelle's movements through extensive surveillance camera footage. They were able to retrace her steps on April 21st. First, Michelle went to her university and met with some classmates at 3:00 p.m. She was seen shopping on Pitt Street in Sydney's central business district. After shopping, she took the subway from Central Station to Camp SE, arriving home at approximately 4:40 p.m. Surveillance footage showed Michelle looking completely normal while shopping and riding the train with no sign of anyone following her. There appeared to be no Opportunity for her to encounter a stranger who might harm her surveillance. Footage further revealed that after Michelle returned home on the afternoon of April 21st, there was no record of her leaving the house again. Coincidentally, from April 21st to April 22nd, Michelle's uncle was the only other person in the house Michelle's aunt was working in Wollongong and did not return home until the evening of April 24th, and her 2 children were also away. This analysis raised significant suspicion against someone who had previously been overlooked. Michelle's uncle. Given this, the police arrested Derek Barrett, charging him with murder and obtaining a search warrant to investigate further. Barrett, whose full name is Derek Barrett, was born in 1989 in a small town called Guilin on the Central Coast. Not much is known about his early life, but after graduation he worked in it for a tech company. It is unclear why he developed feelings for Michelle's aunt, who was nearly 20 years older than him. Shortly after they married, he lost his job for the next 5 years. Barrett stayed home, unemployed, living a routine of sleeping during the day and playing video games at night. Although his family repeatedly urged him to find a job, warning that he would otherwise become useless, he always responded with, "I've applied for jobs, but I never hear back." Despite his unemployment and laziness, Barrett had a calm and polite demeanor. He was respectful to all 4 members of the household, including Michelle, and there were never any conflicts. Because of this, the family lived in harmony. Could such a seemingly mild-mannered man really be the one who murdered Michelle? Barrett's wife and 2 children could not believe it. They refused to accept that the man they had lived with for 5 years could commit such a crime. The family firmly believed that the police had arrested the wrong person. But was this really the case? As the investigation deepened, more incriminating evidence against Barrett began to surface. 2 tourists informed the police that they had seen Barrett at Snapper Point on the Central Coast. At the time, he told them not to approach the cliffs, claiming it was dangerous. Looking back, it seemed he was afraid they would discover the body he had just dumped. Surveillance footage also captured Barrett driving into the national park near Snapper Point early on the morning of April 24th. On his way there, he stopped at a gas station to buy a drink, and the store's security cameras recorded him. He appeared completely calm. At the time, police also recovered 19 nude photos of Michelle on Barrett's phone. These were taken after he had bound her wrists and ankles and gagged her with duct tape, forcing her to pose for the pictures. Although Barrett had deleted the photos, police technicians successfully restored them. Further evidence was found on his computer. It turned out Barrett had been secretly recording Michelle for a long time. He had hidden a camera behind the bathroom mirror to film Michelle while she showered and used the toilet. Shockingly, he did not even spare his wife. Barrett had also filmed her in secret. In addition, he would sneak into the bedrooms of Michelle and his wife while they were fast asleep and masturbate in front of them. All of these acts were recorded, revealing Barrett to be a depraved individual. Combining evidence, witness statements, and various leads, police pieced together the entire sequence of Barrett's crime. Barrett had developed a twisted obsession with Michelle Lang, his wife's niece. All of the politeness he displayed to the family had been a facade. Barrett had been waiting for an opportunity to assault her. That opportunity came on April 21st, when his wife left for work for 3 days and his children were occupied elsewhere. That afternoon, Michelle returned home in good spirits, completely unaware of the monster lying in wait. That night, she made calls to her aunt and her IELTS teacher. After hanging up Barrett, who had already prepared his plans, snuck into her room. Although Michelle fought back fiercely, she was no match for Barrett's strength. In the end, she was overpowered, tied up, and subjected to a brutal assault. On April 22nd, Barrett continued his Depraved actions, however, he did not expect that at 3 p.m. his wife would unexpectedly return home and stay for 3 hours. During this time, Barrett locked himself in the bathroom, leaving the shower running continuously. At one point, he quickly ran to the kitchen to retrieve something and then rushed back to the bathroom. He seemed very nervous about anyone, particularly his daughter, entering the bathroom. When his daughter later asked for shampoo to wash her hair, Barrett only cracked the door open, slightly handed her the shampoo and told her to use another bathroom. At that moment, Michelle was likely still in the bathroom, perhaps even still alive. Tragically, his wife had no idea that something horrific was happening inside her own home. Police believed that if Barrett's wife had discovered his brutal actions at that time, she might have been killed as well. Over the next 2 days, only Barrett and Michelle were in the house for reasons unknown. Barrett stabbed Michelle more than 40 times, with the most severe wounds to her neck. After committing the heinous crime, Barrett began planning how to dispose of the evidence. He decided on the cliffs at Snapper Point on the Central Coast, not far from his parents' home. The area's rugged terrain and powerful ocean waves made it the ideal location for hiding a body. On the morning of April 24th, Barrett wrapped Michelle's body in a plastic bag, placed it in the trunk of his car, and drove 62 miles 100 kilometers to Snapper Point. On the way, he stopped to refuel and bought a drink at a gas station where security cameras recorded him appearing completely calm. After disposing of the body, Barrett deliberately visited his parents' house just a few miles from Snapper Point. This visit was likely an attempt to establish an alibi in case police traced his movements to Snapper Point. That evening, Barrett drove to pick up his wife, pretending as if nothing had happened. He even mentioned that Michelle had not yet returned home. On April 25th, following Michelle's request, the couple went to the police station to report her missing. The rest of the story is now well known. The police's deduction was logical, and all evidence pointed to Barrett as the perpetrator. He had lived under the same roof with Michelle for 5 years, hiding his true nature. Despite the overwhelming evidence, Barrett continued to deny his crimes. Upon hearing the devastating news about her daughter, Michelle's mother immediately flew to Sydney. At a press conference, she broke down in tears, saying, "To this day, I still cannot accept the fact that my beloved daughter is gone. The pain is so overwhelming that I can hardly breathe." Learning that the killer was Barrett left her even more shocked and speechless. Her relationship with her sister had been strong, and she would never have allowed Michelle to live with them otherwise. She firmly believed that her sister knew nothing about Barrett's actions, as everyone had been deceived by his cunning and deceitful facade. Michelle's aunt was consumed with guilt and regret, blaming herself for not recognizing her husband's true nature. Sooner, on May 4th, 2016, the trial for Michelle's murder began. For the first time, Michelle's mother, relatives, and friends attended the courtroom. However, Barrett did not appear in court that day. His lawyer stated that Barrett maintained his innocence, claiming he was being framed, and that he intended to apply for bail to be released on June 29th. The case was brought back to the local court. In addition to the murder charge, Barrett faced 27 other charges, including unlawful imprisonment, sexual assault, and filming others' private parts without their consent. The prosecution informed Michelle Lang's mother that this was only a preliminary hearing in the early stages of the trial, and that her attendance was not necessary. However, despite not having fully recovered her health, she traveled once again from Chingu to Sydney. She said, "Even if I have to sell our only house and lose everything, I will make sure the perpetrator is brought to justice." Due to additional evidence, the trial was postponed to August 10th and then delayed again. During this time, Barrett attempted to evade responsibility by pretending to have a mental illness. However, after a medical evaluation it was determined that he was not mentally ill, perhaps realizing that escaping conviction was unlikely. Barrett did not apply for bail throughout the proceedings. On August 16, 2017, the case resumed at the local court. This time Barrett did not appear in person but attended via video link. He voluntarily pleaded guilty to 5 of the 28 charges, including murder and unlawful imprisonment. However, he insisted, "I don't remember what happened. I just suddenly found myself staring at a sink full of blood." He claimed, "I must have overdosed on drugs and eaten excessively, which caused me to lose control of my actions." It was clear that this statement was an attempt to mitigate his punishment. On December 13, 2017, the New South Wales Supreme Court held the sentencing hearing from Michelle's case. Barrett appeared in court and admitted to breaking into Michelle's room in the early hours of April 22. Despite her resistance, he tied her to the bed, took photos of her, stabbed her over 40 times, hid her body in the house for 2 days, and then disposed of it. He expressed what appeared to be remorse, saying, "My actions betrayed 2 families. She was such a beautiful girl. I feel ashamed of what I did. I am here to tell the truth and offer a small contribution, whether they accept or not." However, throughout the hearing, Barrett kept his head down, shielding his eyes with a tissue. Police believed that his behavior demonstrated insincerity during the proceedings. Barrett again emphasized that he could not clearly recall what had happened that day. He claimed there had been an argument followed by his discovery of blood in the sink. He stated, "I don't know. I think about what happened and why I did it every single day. It makes me deeply sad." For his memory loss, he continued to blame a large intake of drugs and excessive eating before the crime. He claimed the drugs controlled him and that he had no knowledge of his actions. Naturally, the police rejected his explanation. Forensic psychology experts testified that methamphetamine typically does not cause memory loss, particularly at the dosage Barrett claimed to have taken. Furthermore, the nature of the crime clearly showed premeditation, from the act of murder to the disposal of the body. Barrett acted with purpose, following a coherent and logical plan. Surveillance footage showing Barrett calmly stopping to refuel his car and purchase a drink demonstrated his clear state of mind and composure during the incident. Experts also concluded that all evidence indicated Barrett was a sexual sadist with an extraordinarily high risk of reoffending, 10 to 100 times higher than the average person, making him extremely dangerous. They stated that prison was the safest place for him. In the end, Barrett was convicted of 22 charges, including 19 counts of recording intimate images without consent and 2 counts of possessing pornographic materials. 2 days later, New South Wales Supreme Court Justice Helen Wilson, based on the evidence presented by the prosecution, stated that Barrett's actions were an extraordinarily cruel, depraved, and cowardly crime. She further dismissed his claims of being controlled by drugs and suffering memory loss as completely fabricated. During the trial, Barrett occasionally shed tears, but they appeared insincere, more like a performance of remorse. Overall, he was a cold-blooded individual. After thorough deliberation, Barrett was sentenced to 46 years in prison with no parole eligibility for 34 years and 6 months. Following the sentencing, Michelle's grief-stricken mother broke down in tears in court. She knew that Australia does not have the death penalty, so her greatest hope was for Barrett to be imprisoned for life. While the final outcome did not fully meet her expectations, she had no other choice. The lengthy trial had taken a severe toll on her physically and emotionally, as she made countless trips between Sydney and Chingu while enduring immense exhaustion. More heartbreaking than anything were her tearful words, "My Michelle is gone, and my life has completely fallen apart. There is no way to make up for this with." The final verdict announced the case that had shocked both China and Australia finally came to a close. The perpetrator was punished, but the pain of Michelle's tragic death remained, as Detective Gary Jublin told the media outside the courthouse. While the investigation and trial delivered justice, this entire case remains a tragedy indeed. Michelle had worked so hard to gain admission to university, to study abroad, and to build a successful life, yet her beautiful future just beginning was suddenly and cruelly ended as time passed and Barrett remained behind bars. The tragedy slowly faded from public memory. However, no one could have predicted that a USB drive would reignite the case and thrust it back into the media spotlight 3 years after the crime. In November 2019, an elderly woman living in Chatswood, just 3.7 miles from the house where Michelle was murdered, somehow came into possession of a USB drive. The woman had been suffering from Alzheimer's disease for years, rarely leaving her wheelchair or home. When her daughter visited and discovered the USB drive, she was shocked and had no idea where her mother could have obtained it. Out of curiosity, she plugged the USB into her computer. What she saw left her horrified and scarred for life. She immediately contacted the police and handed over the USB. The police were equally appalled by the depravity it contained. The USB held 9 video clips totaling approximately 60 minutes and 13 horrifying photographs. All of the content depicted Barrett's sadistic abuse and violation of Michelle. From multiple angles, he treated Michelle not as a human being but as a lifeless object, mercilessly beating and assaulting her. One particular video included Michelle's desperate plea, "You're insane, what are you doing? You can't treat me this way." From her tear-streaked face and anguished expression, it was clear that she experienced unimaginable fear and pain but was powerless to escape. In the end, she succumbed to the devil's hands. After viewing the contents of the USB, the police immediately filed new charges against Barrett. Thousands of miles away, Michelle's mother received the devastating news, which caused her to collapse once again. Over the years, she had lived with the pain of losing her daughter, but no one could have imagined that an even greater agony was still to come. Michelle's mother said no mother in this world could accept such horrifying news. "My Michelle was such a kind-hearted, thoughtful, filial, and upright child. Hearing what she endured, I feel as though my heart has been shattered into pieces during this time." Barrett wrote an apology letter to Michelle's mother from prison, but the letter was filled with empty, insincere words. Michelle's mother rejected his apology. What was even more infuriating was that during his appeal process, Barrett continued to insist that he had been controlled by drugs. He even told a prison guard that he and Michelle were in a consensual romantic relationship, implying that she had willingly participated. It was clear that Barrett showed no real remorse or accountability for his actions. Supreme Court Justice Helen Wilson stated that had she known about the existence of the USB at the time of sentencing, she would have handed down a life sentence without parole. Unfortunately, double jeopardy laws prevented her from doing so now. However, based on the contents of the USB, the police brought 9 additional charges against Barrett, leading to an additional 25 years in prison. This new sentence, however, was ordered to run concurrently with his existing 46-year sentence. This meant that Barrett's total sentence duration remained unchanged, but his non-parole period was extended from 34 years to 36 years and 6 months. As a result, he will not be eligible for parole until October 27, 2052. Story 5 at 1:30 p.m. on August 29. The day before the incident, Leah and her husband Zhang Wenyu called their parents to say they would visit Wu's father. Answered the phone and, like any parent, was overjoyed to hear that his son and daughter-in-law were coming over 3 hours. Later, at 4:30 p.m., when Wei and Leah arrived, they found the iron gate locked from the inside despite repeatedly ringing the doorbell. There was no response. Wei began to feel uneasy. Just 3 hours ago, his father had cheerfully answered the phone, so why was the house suddenly empty? At that moment, he noticed a note on the door that read as the parents will be immigrating to Argentina. The day after tomorrow, they needed to go south today to bid farewell to relatives and friends. We apologize for any inconvenience. Signed, Yanyui. To understand the characters mentioned in this note and learn more about the case, let's look at the family background. The father mentioned in the note was Zhang Shudu, aged 68. He and his wife Mrs. Kai had 3 children. Their eldest son, who had already settled in Argentina, their daughter Zhang Yin, married to Chinan, who left the note, and their youngest son, Zhang Wenwu, married to Lia, who stopped the police car. The Zhang family was a wealthy merchant family in their early years. Mr. and Mrs. Zhang started with a small barber shop in Taipei, carefully saving their earnings. Later, they boldly invested in real estate around Hudong Street. Fortune smiled upon them as this coincided with Tai's urban expansion, causing the value of Mr. Zhang's property investments to skyrocket within just a few years. By seizing this opportunity, the couple had built considerable wealth. Of their 3 children, the eldest son had chosen to settle in Argentina early on, following his lead. Their daughter and her husband, Inu, also established the Els in that distant country. Only the youngest son, Wei, and his wife remained in Taiwan to care for his parents. Mr. and Mrs. Zhuang lived at 131 Hang Street, which would later become the crime scene. By August 1986, Mr. and Mrs. Zhang had also decided to immigrate to Argentina to reunite with their children and enjoy their retirement. Their son-in-law Inu made a special trip back from Argentina to help them with immigration procedures and accompany them on their journey, learning that their parents would soon leave Taiwan for Argentina. Wei and his wife wanted to visit and help with the packing. Around 4 p.m. on August 29th, they arrived at 131A Yung Street, but were surprised to find the main door locked from inside. There was a note on the door, and oddly enough, while the handwriting was indeed Yunu, it stated that the parents had gone to South Taiwan to bid farewell to friends. This made Wei extremely suspicious. How could his parents suddenly leave when just 3 hours ago his father had been happily talking on the phone? His parents hadn't mentioned any plans to go south and had even cheerfully said they would wait for the couple to come over for afternoon tea. His mother had specifically asked Leah to take the longer route through Sherlin to buy her favorite pork knuckles and steamed buns, so why would she suddenly change her plans? After waiting at the door for quite a while, the couple decided to find a nearby restaurant to rest. During this time, Wei couldn't settle his mind and kept calling home, hoping his parents had returned. Finally, at 10:30 p.m. someone answered the phone, but instead of his parents' familiar voices, it was his brother-in-law Inu on the line. He hastily said, "Only the parents haven't returned yet," before hanging up abruptly. The brother-in-law's strange behavior made the couple even more uneasy. They hurriedly discussed returning to the house to check if anything was wrong. When they arrived back at the house, Wei rang the doorbell again. After a while, his brother-in-law appeared in apro, rightly dressed in just a white tank top and shorts. With visible irritation, he snapped, "Why are you coming at this hour? I already told you the parents aren't home." The couple quickly explained they just wanted to see if they could help with anything. They went upstairs, and Inu didn't stop them from entering in the living room. He sat down on the sofa, putting his feet up on the chair. Wu immediately sensed something was wrong. His brother-in-law's complexion was Unusual, his eyes were bloodshot and he looked exhausted. More disturbing was the smell of blood in the room, and there were sticky stains on the furniture that looked like dried blood. Unable to contain himself, Wei asked, "What's that up there?" Without even looking, Ian immediately replied, "Just mosquito stains." Wu continued asking about his parents' whereabouts. Did they really go south this afternoon? Why didn't they say anything beforehand? Inu replied indifferently, "It was a last-minute decision. They specifically told me you would visit this afternoon, which is why I left the note." Then suddenly, as if unable to contain himself any longer, Inu abruptly changed the subject and began complaining about his in-laws. The parents are so biased, always favoring the eldest son. Honestly, among all their sons and sons-in-law, who hasn't treated them well? Why don't we get any share of the assets? The eldest son already has plenty of money. The youngest son, Wei, was startled by this, but fortunately reacted quickly, going along with his brother-in-law's words. "Actually, I have issues with this too. Sure, they can go to Argentina, but why not leave me anything? What good is this old house to me? My business hasn't been doing well lately, and I've wanted to borrow money from them but couldn't even bring myself to ask. I sometimes wonder if they're going to Argentina just to avoid me." After Wu's comments, his brother-in-law became visibly excited, as if he'd found an ally. He continued, "I'm practically their son too, yet they guard against me like I'm a thief. You're their actual son, but what good has it done you? They'd rather run off to Argentina than live with you." The two men continued talking animatedly in the living room, but Wei knew very well in his heart his parents weren't that kind of people. He was only playing along to avoid arousing his brother-in-law's suspicions. In fact, from the moment he entered the house, Wei had noticed things were off. His parents' sudden departure without notice, the locked door since afternoon, bloodstains on furniture, the lingering metallic smell that wouldn't dissipate, plus his brother-in-law's strange demeanor. All these signs told instincts that something terrible had happened to his parents. Though terrified inside, Wei maintained a calm exterior, smiling and chatting with his brother-in-law as if everything was normal. He knew he absolutely couldn't risk making his brother-in-law suspicious while the two men were engaged in conversation. Wei's wife Lihua excused herself to use the bathroom. What she saw there horrified her. Blood stains remained in the tile grout. Though someone had clearly tried to clean up, they couldn't erase all traces of evidence. Moreover, her in-laws' bedroom door was tightly locked, and the smell of blood grew stronger near the door. At this point, Lihua was certain that a murder had taken place in the house, and her in-laws had likely met a tragic fate. Though heartbroken, Leah forced herself not to cry. She understood that if she confronted her brother-in-law now, both she and her husband could be in mortal danger. She wiped away her tears, composed herself, and returned to the living room. Over the next hour, she secretly traced letters on her husband's thigh with her finger to communicate. Fortunately, the couple knew each other well enough that W understood his suspicions were correct. Something terrible had happened to his parents. During this time, brother-in-law Inu repeatedly suggested, "It's so hot today. Why don't you two take a shower by now?" The couple understood he might be trying to separate them, to make them vulnerable, so they both politely declined and insisted on staying in the living room to chat. The three of them continued like this for over 4 hours until 4 a.m. The next morning. The brother-in-law had smoked nearly half a pack of cigarettes. At this point, Leah suddenly stood up, pretending everything was normal, and said, "You shouldn't smoke so much. Let me clean up this mess. Look at all these cigarette butts scattered around." She then started tidying up. Soon after, she took a carefully tied garbage bag and walked toward the stairs, saying she was going down to throw out the trash. Leah chose this moment because she knew garbage collectors would come around 4 a.m., and she had planned to ask either them or any passers-by to help call the police by coincidence when she reached the street corner. She saw a garbage truck slowly approaching, but what she hadn't expected was that there was a police patrol car following behind the garbage truck. Lihua immediately dropped the garbage bag and ran to stop the police car. After the police got out of their car, Leah told them everything she had discovered. The three officers immediately followed her to 131 hectares Jiang Street and quickly went up to the second floor. In the living room, faced the police without showing any sign of panic, remaining calmly seated on the sofa. However, based on their professional instincts, the three officers immediately noticed an unusual metallic smell in the house. Two officers began checking the upper and lower floors for anything suspicious, while the third officer stayed in the living room to watch Inu. Meanwhile, Wei and Lihua went to his parents' master bedroom door. Wei kicked the door hard several times, but it wouldn't budge. With no other choice, he helped his wife climb through the small window into the room. Soon after, Leah managed to open the door from inside. When they entered the master bedroom, they found 6 pieces of luggage. Yu's heart was pounding as he slowly unzipped one of the bags and saw blood-soaked body parts. The emotions he had been suppressing suddenly erupted and he screamed in horror. Murder! This heart-wrenching scream caught the attention of all 3 officers. They rushed over, urging Wei not to disturb the crime scene, but then a problem arose. All 3 officers were now in the bedroom, so who was watching the brother-in-law in the living room? When 2 officers suddenly remembered this and rushed back to the living room, the sofa was empty. Indeed, the suspect had escaped right under their noses. The police headquarters quickly received the report. A large number of officers were dispatched to secure the crime scene. Crime scene investigators, prosecutors, and forensic experts arrived one after another. As they opened the bag one by one, they discovered the killer had methodically sorted the victim's body parts, 2 heads in one bag for hands, in another bag feet and internal organs, sorted into different bags. Besides the 6 pieces of luggage, they found an array of weapons in the master bedroom, including a half-moon-shaped cleaver, fruit knives, scissors, serrated knives, and other tools. The initial investigation results came quickly. Mr. Shidu was first struck in the head with a blunt object, then stabbed in the chest. Mrs. Jiang's cause of death was a stab wound to the heart. What puzzled the police was that the crime scene showed no signs of a violent struggle. Neighbors also reported hearing no unusual sounds. What surprised the forensic experts was that all body parts had been precisely cut at the joints. Both the weapons used and the method of dismemberment suggested the work of someone with butcher-like skills. After confirmation, Mr. and Mrs. Shido's bodies had been dismembered into 32 pieces. When forensic experts tried to reconstruct the remains, they made a shocking discovery. Mrs. Jiang's body was missing both her heart and liver. Police searched the entire building but couldn't find the missing organs. However, more urgent than locating the missing body parts was finding the suspect. Based on all available evidence, everything pointed to the son-in-law. Yanyue police used the youngest son whose testimony to reconstruct the sequence of events. Yunu had likely killed both in-laws before 4:00 p.m. on the 29th, then left the misleading note on the door. In reality, he was inside the house dismembering the bodies and cleaning the scene. By 10 p.m. that evening, he was still able to calmly receive his brother-in-law and his wife in the living room. If the couple hadn't been so vigilant, they might have met the same fate. Why would a son-in-law commit such a brutal act against his in-laws? Initially, everyone assumed Yun, who must have done it for money, but when police searched the scene, they found $200,000 in cash along with In, whose ID and passport still in the house. If money was the motive, why weren't these valuables taken? This puzzle could actually be Easily explained, most likely when Inu realized he had been discovered. Unexpectedly, he fled in panic without having time to take the money. Uni was 26 when he married the eldest daughter of the Zhang family, Yuchen. At the time, he was a medical student when they married. His father-in-law, Mr. Su Du, was very generous, spending $2 million to buy them an apartment on Zhangge Road in the Wanhua district as a wedding gift. This shows how satisfied the in-laws were with him. Initially, however, no one expected that Yunhui would not be content with his situation while still in medical school. He suddenly became intensely interested in business. As a result, he dropped out of school, fixated on becoming a successful businessman. While the ambition to build wealth from scratch isn't wrong in itself, the problem was that every time Inhu invested in something, it ended in complete failure. According to close associates, he had never succeeded even once. Although Inhui's family was relatively well off, they couldn't continue supporting his repeated business failures when he could no longer rely on resources from his own family. Inu turned his attention to his father-in-law. Initially, Mr. and Mrs. Su Du remained generous with their son-in-law, almost always providing money whenever he asked, but gradually they realized he was like a bottomless pit, so they arranged for their daughter and son-in-law to immigrate to Argentina, where their eldest son had already settled. They hoped that in this new environment, Inu would finally conduct business seriously and stop wasting money. When he first arrived in Argentina, Inu appeared to have changed. Through his brother-in-law's connections, he fortunately secured a position at a slaughterhouse. However, this hope didn't last long. Soon after, he quit this stable job to join a fellow immigrant in investing in an auto body repair shop. The result was disastrous. Within just a few months, all the investment capital had vanished. It wasn't until later that the Zhang's eldest son discovered that the money Yunu had invested in the repair shop had actually come from his parents secretly supporting him. Again, furious at this revelation, he couldn't help but scold his parents. From that point on, Mr. and Mrs. Su finally resolved to cut off all financial support to their son-in-law. Still, the eldest son couldn't feel at ease. He worried that his parents wouldn't be able to resist Inhu's pleading and pressure. Finally, he suggested having his parents come live with him in Argentina. With him watching over them, at least they could prevent Yin from squandering away the family's assets. The elderly couple agreed with this idea and decided to reunite with their eldest son in Argentina. At this point, Inu suddenly returned to Taiwan without warning, eagerly helping his in-laws with immigration procedures. Family members believed Yin Hui's proactive return to Taiwan was actually targeting his father-in-law real estate properties in Taipei. He calculated that since the elderly couple would be settling abroad permanently, they would certainly have to sell these properties, so he wanted to take advantage of this opportunity. However, from the current outcome, it's clear that Inu didn't achieve his goal. That's why during the night of the murder, while sitting with his brother-in-law, he kept complaining about his in-laws' favoritism. After compiling all this background information, the police could establish that the son-in-law's motive was money. They immediately froze all accounts under Mr. Su Du's name to prevent any assets from being transferred. According to police investigation, when Inu fled the scene in panic, he was wearing only a tank top and shorts with no passport or money. Police predicted he couldn't survive on the run for more than a few days. Sure enough, 3 days after the murder, with no money and no connections, Inu had no choice but to turn himself in. However, surprisingly, he didn't choose to go to a police station on the morning of the third day after the murder. Around 8 a.m. Ian called the Ministry of Justice, identifying himself as the perpetrator of the Hud Young Street murder and requesting to the minister he explained that the case was connected to a secret Brazilian organization that wanted to destabilize Taiwan, he claimed. He was sent by this organization because the case was highly confidential, he said. He couldn't surrender at a police station, fearing that if the secret leaked, the organization would harm his family. Ian revealed he was calling from a public phone booth next to the Taipei First Girls High School soon after the chief prosecutor of the Taipei District Prosecutor's Office and several high-ranking officials quickly arrived at the location and found Inu. To avoid media attention, the prosecutors conducted a secret interrogation of Inu. During questioning, he claimed he had acted on the organization's orders and mentioned an accomplice named Wang. He stated that this Superior Wang was the one who actually killed his in-laws, while he helped restrain and gag the victims, then assisted with dismembering and bagging the bodies. Inu explained that Wang knew his in-laws were wealthy and was aware of his poor relationship with them, so he planned this crime. After success, the organization would take a portion of the money as operational funds. While these statements sound completely absurd to us now, in the political context of that era, the authorities couldn't dismiss them outright, especially when Yandu mentioned previous terrorist attacks their organization had allegedly carried out in Taiwan, providing extensive details. For example, he mentioned a bombing at a newspaper office next to the Taipei station on April 26, 1983. Though no one died, 12 people were injured. Additionally, 22 minutes before that explosion, an elevator in a building on Section 4 of Zhangxia Road had also exploded. At the time, both incidents had indeed been classified as terrorist acts. Inu claimed all these events were planned by their organization. He even named specific individuals who carried out these incidents, providing detailed accounts of each event. However, after several months of thorough investigation, prosecutors began to realize Inu was likely lying while he could describe these terrorist attacks in detail. These were all headline news stories from that time, not secret information at all. When prosecutors asked him to share information that only organization members would know, or about plans not yet executed, Inu could only stand and provided no answers. Furthermore, the supposed superior named Wang was completely fabricated. Uni couldn't provide any full name, address, or age for this person. Finally, it became clear that Inu had cleverly exploited the authority sensitivity to conspiracy theories to mislead investigators. He knew that just mentioning a secret organization would force the government to investigate thoroughly to catch all involved parties. This tactic could potentially drag the investigation out for years. Nonetheless, the prosecutors finally determined that Yunhui was the sole perpetrator, with money as his simple motive. They formally indicted this inhumane son-in-law at the initial trial. When faced with intense questioning, Inu admitted to killing his in-laws for money. However, he stubbornly clung to his story about the accomplice named Wang, insisting he was forced to participate by a secret organization that needed money. However, this claim was firmly rejected by both sons of the Zhang family. During the trial, Inu requested fingerprint comparisons to prove his story, but forensic experts explained that the fabric bags containing the bodies weren't suitable for collecting clear fingerprints, and all the murder weapons had been cleaned. Moreover, since the defendant had lived in the house, even if fingerprints were found, he could easily explain them away given the limited forensic technology of the time and the small fingerprint database. Available fingerprint evidence proved useless in this case. Finally, the judge concluded that Hui's statements were fabrications meant to justify his actions and were completely unreliable. He was sentenced to death. However, when the case reached the appeals court, there was a dramatic turn. The High Court convicted him of continuous murder with accomplices, though still maintaining the death sentence. The court ruled this way because they believed the crime couldn't have been committed by one person alone. Citing three main reasons, the High Court cited three main reasons. First, both elderly victims were of large build, making it nearly impossible for Yin to overpower them both alone. Second, the murders occurred during daylight hours. If he had acted alone, the victims would surely have screamed for help, yet neighbors heard nothing. Third, the crime scene had been cleaned exceptionally thoroughly, which seemed impossible for one person to accomplish because the appeals court judge leaned toward the multiple perpetrator theory. The prosecutor disagreed with this ruling and appealed. The case was thus sent back to the High Court for retrial. This inadvertently gave Inu more time. In the early morning of October 21st, 1987, Inu took advantage of being released for medical treatment and escaped with two other inmates. When the prison guards were inattentive, they used an iron bar to pry off their shackles, then split up and fled in different directions. This gave Yanu a brief taste of freedom. During the subsequent manhunt, police discovered that Inu had a mistress, Mrs. Wu, in Taiwan. Police believed that after escaping, Inu would likely seek her help. Following this lead, police went to Mrs. Wu's residence but found she had moved. They left officers to monitor the location, waiting to see if Inu would come looking for his mistress. Their patience paid off. Not knowing she had moved, Inu arrived only to find police waiting instead of his mistress. To prevent any further unexpected incidents, the Tape Supreme Court sentenced Inu to death on March 4, 1988, with immediate execution 1 week later at 5:30 a.m. on March 11th. His life ended at the execution grounds. However, one question still troubled many people: what happened to the missing heart and liver? Initially, all media outlets only reported that the victim was missing a heart and liver. It wasn't until a year later that the press revealed that police had initially returned to the crime scene and taken an inner pot from a rice cooker. As for what was in the pot, official media never disclosed its contents. Ian had been singularly focused on success, determined to achieve his dream of wealth. On the surface, this seemed like the same aspiration that most hardworking people share, which isn't wrong in itself, which shook the entire city of Ender. During that time, nobody had left Mega's house until noon, and no one's voice was heard. However, suddenly, one of Mega Despon's neighbors walked by her house and noticed something very unusual. There were footprints with blood stains around Mega's house. This sight alarmed her, prompting her to quickly call the authorities to investigate Mega's house. After that, the neighbor also knocked on the door of several times, but there was no response from inside. Then they tried to look up inside the house through a window, but upon seeing what was inside, he screamed loudly because he saw 3 women lying on the ground in the house with blood all around their bodies. After this, in a state of panic, the neighbor quickly informed the police about it. For the police, this case was completely different because such an incident had never happened in the Serena area. Now, gradually, many people of this society came to know about this incident, and by the time the police reached the crime scene, a large crowd had gathered outside the Deshpan family's house. Then the police entered the house and were surprised to see the bodies of 3 women who had been brutally murdered by the criminals. They seized the crime scene and began their investigation, discovering 2 bullet shells inside the house. A police officer observed that Mega had been fatally shot in the head, but they could not locate the second bullet despite thoroughly searching every corner of the house. After this, the police called in the forensic team to start collecting evidence from the crime scene, and then the dead bodies of these 3 women were sent for post-mortem. By this time, not only Shenner but the entire city of Ender was shocked with this news. A few hours later, the postmortem report is presented to the police, revealing that the murders of 21-year-old Asaha and her 70-year-old grandmother Rohini were due to excessive bleeding with multiple stab wounds inflicted on their bodies. This report also makes it clear that only Megha Deshpande was shot to death, but now the biggest question before the police was if they have found 2 bullet shells, then on whom was the second shot fired. On the other hand, Megha's husband and the general public started demanding a quick solution to the case so the culprits could be punished. The police felt the increasing pressure from the public and a sense of urgency to solve the case quickly. Consequently, several teams were deployed by the police to investigate. One team examined the called detail records of the victims, while another team rechecked the forensic evidence. At first, the police found out that at the crime scene there was blood of an additional person besides Megha, Asaha and Rohini, and the robbery and murder was filed as it appeared that theft had taken place at the Deshpande family's residence. Later investigations revealed that there were multiple calls made to Megha's phone from a specific number, and Megha had lengthy conversations with this number. Now the police extracted complete information about this number from where it was revealed to police that this number belonged to a girl named Njavara. Now the police had also started tracking the location of the girl so that they could talk to her regarding this case, which might provide them with some leads. On the other hand, the police now also had a sample of that blood, which was separate from Megha, Asaha and Rohini at the crime scene. Then one day, suddenly the police find out that Neha is near an ATM in that area. After that, a team of police reached there and brought Neha to the police station to talk to her. Now Neha was told about the entire scene, which left Neha completely astonished. After that, Neha explained how she met Megha. Megha and Neha met for the first time in a shopping mall. Neha accidentally bumped into Megha while rushing through them all. Megha was holding some items in her hand which fell down due to the collision. Neha then apologized and helped Megha pick up the fallen items. During this time, there was a lot of conversation between them, so much so that Neha herself went to drop Megha to the car, and from here onwards their friendship started. Nja discovered that Megha works at a company involved in multi-level marketing MLM. They exchanged phone numbers the same day and started talking occasionally. Neha was curious about the MLM business model, so she would discuss it with Megha. However, the police became suspicious of Neha's story because her words and body language didn't align. As a result, they questioned Neha extensively. Neha tried to conceal her lie briefly, but she couldn't withstand the police interrogation for long. Eventually, she confessed a story that shocked even the police. Neha, a 23-year-old, was beautiful and cheerful. Although she was a beautician, her financial situation wasn't good enough for her to fulfill her dreams. Neha's father was an ordinary van driver, which meant their financial condition wasn't great enough for Neha to pursue her dreams. It was during this time that Neha met a guy named Rahul Chaudhary. They developed a good friendship, which eventually turned into love. Rahul, at 24, was handsome, but his financial situation was the same as Neha's. Despite this, they loved each other deeply and wanted to marry, so they were searching for a way to become rich overnight and live their lives comfortably. One day, Neha met Megha. Megha had a fondness for wearing expensive jewelry, so whenever she went out, she adorned herself with her jewels. The day Megha met Neha for the first time, she was decked out in gold jewelry, which indicated to Neha that Megha was very wealthy, sparking the idea in Neha's mind to get close to Mish P and befriend her. Subsequently, deliberately bumped into Megha to strike up a conversation, and thus their interactions began. Now, gradually, due to talking through a call, the thought of robbing Megha came into Neha's mind. After this, Neha included her boyfriend Rahul in her plan. She told Rahul that she has conversations with a woman who is very wealthy, and the added advantage is that there are no men in her house, so it will be easy to rob her. Hearing this idea, Rahul also becomes happy because by doing this both of their financial situations would improve, and then they could live comfortably. After getting married from that day on, Rahul began to plan the murders of these 3 women. He believed that if he successfully killed them without anyone finding out, there would be no one to report them. With a complete plan in place, Rahul only needed a gun to carry out the deed. His friend Manoj, who was close to both Rahul and Naha, provided him with one, as he also had a gun with the means to execute his plan. Rahul started searching for the right day to make his move against Megha and her family. On June 13, 2011, Naha contacted Megha to join her MLM scheme. Megha was pleased to have Naha on board. Unbeknownst to Megha, this day would bring unforeseen tragedy. Naha arrived at Megha's house early the next morning. Megha asked Naha to fill out a form for the company, but Naha was unsure about the required information. She requested help from her friend, and Megha approved. Neha then contacted her boyfriend Rahul. Now, according to the plan, Rahul and Manoj were waiting for N's call, and then shortly after that, Rahul and Manoj went to Megha's house. But as soon as Rahul entered the house, he showed Megha a gun, and then a few seconds later he shot Megha, causing her to die on the spot. The sound of the gunshot didn't go out of their house because Rahul had shot very close, but the sound of this gunshot reached Ashlasha and Rohini's ears, causing both of them to run into the lobby. After that, first Rahul and Manoj frightened Ashlash and Rohin and asked for her ATM card in PIN to save their lives. In order to save her life, Ashlash quickly gave her ATM card and handed it to Rahul. She felt that now these people would leave, but now, because Ashlasha and her grandmother had seen Naha, Rahul and Manoj's faces, so now these 3 were afraid that after they leave, these 2 might inform the police. So Rahul first tried to shoot Asha's, but in haste this bullet hit Rahul's own foot. Afterwards, Manoj brutally murdered Ashlasha and elderly Rohini with a knife. Afterwards, these 3 criminals stole 1,000 Indian rupees valuable jewelry, worth up to $500,000 Indian rupees, and Asha's ATM card before leaving the house. Surprisingly, it was the same ATM card Naha was planning to withdraw money from, but she was later caught by the police. Rahul was captured after going to a police station with a fake first information report and then being hospitalized locally due to a gunshot wound in his foot. Nonetheless, when the police compared Rahul's blood sample taken from the crime scene with his own, it was a match. The police quickly solved this case and captured the criminals, resulting in much praise for their city's police force. Subsequently, this case remained in court for a long time, but eventually in December 2013, the district court sentenced these 3 criminals to death by hanging. These killers had wiped out the entire Deshpande family line by murdering women from 3 different generations. Moreover, the police found bloodied clothes, knives, and jewelry in possession of these criminals. Javara is currently incarcerated in the central jail, where she is teaching a beauty parlor course to other female inmates. It should also be noted that this was the first time the district court had pronounced capital punishment for a woman. Megha's husband Nai Deshpande expressed satisfaction with the court's decision and said he had full confidence in the judiciary and the police did a great job. The aspiration to become rich overnight turned an ordinary girl and boy into criminals. If these criminals had fled to another country after killing and stealing money, they might never have been caught. However, if Megha hadn't worn her valuable jewelry to the mall that day and hadn't trusted a random person, perhaps her family would still be alive today. One lesson to be learned from this is that we shouldn't develop such strong friendships with any stranger in just a few days that we start inviting them home. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Kina Vetrano, the story of Karina Vetrano is both horrifying and baffling. Firstly, nothing seemed to miss on the day of the fateful event. The attack occurred in broad daylight in a fairly populated area. Secondly, her death has critical aspects to it. Thirdly, the investigation and sentencing of the perpetrator raised many questions. On Tuesday, August 2nd, 2016, Karina arranged to meet her father after work to spend time together. Since Miss Vetrano had moved away, family gatherings had become rare because everyone was busy with their own matters. In addition to her commitments, she was balancing two jobs. Philip picked up his daughter and took her home. There the family shared their impressions of the past week. When Karina was about to leave, she asked if her father wanted to go jogging with her, as they often did, covering several miles together. Her father replied that he couldn't this time due to severe back pain that nothing seemed to alleviate. Perhaps he needed a new prescription, or maybe it was just the change in weather. Mr. Vetrano offered to call a cab for Karina due to his discomfort and inability to join her run. However, the weather was beautiful, the heat had abated, and there was a fresh scent in the air. Hence, Karina declined his offer. She was training for the upcoming marathon. The young woman had recently broken up with her boyfriend and wanted to distract herself. A jog would clearly do her good. That evening was the last time her parents saw their youngest daughter. At 5:45 p.m., she left the house for a jog. Her first stop was Spring Creek Park, a cozy and tranquil place, buried in greenery, a true paradise amongst the city's infrastructure. However, only part of the park was available for walking. The rest was covered with thickets and swamps. Mr. Vetrano asked his daughter to stick to her usual route and stay away from unfamiliar paths and people. Unfortunately, Karina ignored his advice. In search of solitude, she decided to go to a grassy, deserted place. Karina's thoughts were abruptly interrupted. She felt a sharp pain in the back of her head and fell down. This rash decision cost the young woman her life. A frightening uncertainty entered the Vetrano home. It had been 2 hours since they had said goodbye to their youngest daughter. She should have been home by now, or at least answering the calls of her parents, who were frantically trying to reach her, and she had promised to keep her cell phone with herself. The anxiety was growing. Her father sensed that something was wrong and decided to seek help from his neighbor, the chief of the New York City Police Department. They were on good terms, and the high-ranking official knew that Philip would not make a fuss over nothing. After that, Karina Vetrano was reported missing. Police began searching for the young woman, combing the park area and surrounding streets. As a result, experienced canine units were brought in, since it is known the first 24 hours after the disappearance of a person are crucial. Law enforcement utilized all available resources before nightfall. At the same time, Mr. Vetrano, along with a group of volunteers, searched for his daughter on his own. He scoured the park from end to end, combing paths and wading through tall grass, all while making phone calls. As dusk fell, he noticed a light in the grass. As he approached, he recognized Karina's phone. Maybe she lost it and just didn't let them know. Philip approached, headed toward police officers, deciding to continue picking his way through the thicket. Stepping into the grass as he ventured further, Philip stumbled upon something soft, a partially undressed female body lying face down. When he turned it over, a familiar face stared back at him. A desperate scream escaped from his father's chest. It was Karina. She hadn't simply lost her phone, as he had initially believed. His little girl didn't answer her phone because life had been cruelly taken from her. The crushing realization of what had transpired overwhelmed Mr. Vetrano. The Police, hearing the screaming and yelling, quickly rushed to him. They dragged Philly away from his daughter's body, explaining that it was now a crime scene. They emphasized that anything in the vicinity could be considered evidence, and implored him not to touch anything, to prevent tampering on the journey home. Mr. Vetrano was lost in thought, tormented by how to break the news of their daughter's death to his wife. Images of past memories flooded his mind. He recalled vividly how on July 12, 1986, in Queens, their second daughter was born. From an early age, Philip had been proud of Karina. She was obedient and well-mannered. He remembered taking her to school for the first time and how excellently she performed academically. Her strong educational foundation enabled her to earn advanced degrees. Karina graduated from St. John's University with a master's in speech pathology. She always dreamed of aiding children and worked tirelessly with autistic kids. Karina loved traveling and writing and had a passion for sports, especially running, an interest she shared with Philip, which brought them closer together. He recalled how closely he scrutinized her suitors out of paternal jealousy, eager for her to find true love and eventually establish a strong family like his own with Kathy. He hoped for wonderful grandchild. The return journey felt endless. As they approached the house, Mr. Vetrano paused at the entrance and took a deep breath. Fortunately, he didn't need to explain anything to her. She understood everything from her husband's face. Kathy cried, approached her husband and hugged him. Soon Karina's relatives and friends learned of the incident. They struggled to recover from the shock, believing in the sudden death of the young woman was hard, let alone its violent nature. Miss Vetrano had been subjected to a brutal attack. This was the conclusion reached by investigators. At first glance, it was obvious that the woman had resisted. Even in death, her fists remained clenched. Bruises and abrasions were found on her once young and healthy body, and her athletic clothing was torn. The autopsy showed that the back of the victim's skull had been damaged by a blunt object, probably a stone. However, the cause of death was asphyxiation. A clear mark was visible on the woman's neck. The forensic examination also revealed the intimate nature of the crime. Violence. The experts' findings confirmed the police's initial suspicions. Earth and grass were found under the victim's fingernails, probably in an attempt to free herself from her attacker's grip and escape. Specialists examined her mouth and found teeth knocked out and cracked in places. She had clearly bitten to defend herself. Even the woman's neck was covered with numerous scratches. She was grabbing with her hands, trying to force her attacker to let go of her. Shortly after this tragedy, new information leaked to the media from Princeton, Massachusetts. Another jogger's body was found among tall grass. The woman had apparently also been out for a walk in a secluded place and suffered a similar fate. At first glance, these cases seemed identical, raising questions about another potential serial offender in the United States. Geneticists took charge of the case, tasked with comparing DNA samples collected from the crime scenes. Fortunately, unidentified samples were found on both victims. Contrary to police expectations, the analysis showed no connection between the crimes. It turned out that the DNA samples belonged to different individuals. It's well known that most lethal crimes are committed by someone close to the victim. Thus, police couldn't ignore any possibility. To this end, the victim's father provided his DNA, since he was first to discover his daughter's body. Later on, all of her relatives also underwent a DNA test, which yielded no matches. Detectives then decided to interview Karina's family and friends to find out if she had any enemies or ill wishes. It turned out there were none. She was respected and loved by everyone. Investigators developed a new theory. Someone acted on base motives upon meeting Karina in a secluded place and attacked her. Feeling stuck, they sought public help by offering a $10,000 reward for information leading to the perpetrator. The initiative received widespread response. Detectives explored some 250 leads, conducted 600 genetic tests, and compiled more than 1,700 reports, all to no avail. It seemed like the perpetrator hadn't committed crimes before, or at least hadn't been caught, for them complicating things further on. August 31st, 2016, a utility worker approached the police station with significant information. At the time of Ms. Vetrano's death, he found himself in a restricted area of the park. One day, suddenly a man emerged from the bushes and took off, running in a nollie direction. Because of his testimony, the New York Police Department created and distributed a sketch of the suspect in December 2016. However, they considered that the person shown in the sketch might have just been a passer-by caught at the wrong place in time. Unfortunately, releasing the sketch didn't provide any new leads, and the investigation fell into another long stalemate. On December 4th, 2016, the Federal Bureau of Investigation joined in to help solve Karina Vetrano's case. At first, they developed a psychological profile of the perpetrator. According to FBI experts, this individual was very familiar with the area, especially the park where everything occurred, suggesting he might live or continue to live nearby. Fearing capture now, he seems to avoid that area. It was evident he knew that the quiet and partially overgrown territory was perfect for hiding his actions. Based on this idea, police conducted screenings among local African American men. However, this didn't bring about any breakthroughs. Let's go in to take a look about Chanel Lewis. Chanel Lewis's life didn't stand out much from other young African American individuals. He lived in one of Brooklyn's low-income housing complexes, approximately 4 or 5 miles from Spring Creek Park. Chanel was unemployed and living with his mother, 3 sisters, and their children. One detail setting him apart was his diagnosis of paranoid schizophrenia, yet this did not stop him from graduating from a private school for students with emotional and behavioral issues. Former classmates remembered Chanel as a quiet loner who constantly faced bullying. One shared that even girls intimidated and punched him. He had no friends. Another peer noted that while Lewis sometimes fought back, he wasn't effective at it and often got ridiculed for his clothing and appearance. Chanel always wore a hoodie and would smirk and walk away when things got tough, earning him the unfortunate nickname African Lizard. 17-year-old Danielle Munes, a fellow student, described Chanel as a bright student with good grades. He liked to show me funny videos on the bus. She recalled, I never saw him being cruel. Some sources reported that the young man once claimed he wanted to harm all the girls during his time in middle school. Sco even posing the question, what happens if I bring a knife to school? Dr. Edward Dana, the executive director of the school to which Chanel was transferred, commented on this. We received no reports of threats in middle school during his time at our school. He had no disciplinary sanctions. I never heard him make threatening statements towards other students. Nonetheless, Chanel was a troubled teenager who often experienced bullying. He dreamed of working in social services, aspiring to help those in distress. When conflicts arose at home, he would wander the streets frequently and visit the park. Lewis had several minor encounters with the police, 2 for violations in Spring Creek and 1 for urinating in public. In May 2016, another incident happened when a local merchant reported Lewis for loitering in his store with a crowbar. Responding officers checked Chanel's ID and released him as he had no prior incidents. However, this information was retained by the police and later played a crucial role in the investigation into Karina Vetrano's death. In February 2017, Detective John Russo, who was involved in the investigation remembered something significant. He had repeatedly seen a young man in a hoodie wandering around the park. Russo even attempted to follow him once. Intrigued by his behavior, the young man walked slowly and stopped for long periods in front of houses near the park as if scouting them for potential burglaries. However, Russo lost sight of him when he contacted his colleagues by phone following a store owner's report of suspicious activity. A teenager matching Chanel's description came to the police's attention 2 months into the investigation. Detective Russo recalled this wanderer, thinking he might have seen or heard something relevant. Investigators then focused on Chanel Lewis after Detective Russo took a closer look at his file. Chanel's peculiarities had raised their interest. The police began inquiries about him, questioning acquaintances and teachers. It emerged that he had allegedly expressed a desire to harm girls. This news stirred significant concern and suspicion. With no other leads, officers decided to focus on Lewis. It was discovered that during Karina's death, Chanel was not at home after an argument with his family. He had gone to the park. Upon his return, his appearance was disheveled, his clothes torn, and he had visible bruises and abrasions. When his mother inquired about what had happened, Lewis claimed he had been attacked. His account matched the timeline with a witness's description of a man fleeing the park. Additionally, on August 3, 2016, Lewis's father, a former school principal, took him to the hospital for treatment of severe wounds, mostly cuts, and he also had an injured hand. The investigators reviewed the medical records from that day and found the story plausible. However, they noted similarities between events involving Chanel Lewis and Karina Vitrano. On February 4, 2017, Chanel was brought to the police station and voluntarily provided his DNA for analysis. Detectives wondered if a perpetrator would willingly do this. The interrogation began on the morning of February 5. Lewis admitted that he was indeed in the park around 5 p.m. on August 2, 2016, but clarified he was walking on dirt paths listening to music, not through thickets. He confessed to encountering a young woman jogging with her phone in her hand. When asked by detectives if something happened when he encountered her, Chanel nodded and quietly said, "Yes, I was walking in the park trying to distract myself from a family argument when I met a woman alone." He began again, "I decided to follow her. When she passed by me, I grabbed her shoulders and threw her to the ground, then hit her face about 5 times so she couldn't scream." He recalled how his punches knocked out several of her teeth, injuring his own hand in the process, echoing details eerily consistent with earlier evidence they had gathered. He also mentioned that the struggle lasted about 5 minutes. Miss Vrono fiercely resisted by biting to avoid drawing attention. Lewis dragged her off the path into tall, where he tried to undress and assault her. She was horrified but kept resisting. Chanel then strangled her until he realized she was no longer alive. When asked if he knew the victim beforehand, he replied, "I did not know her before this. It all happened by chance." The motive for the ACT was unexpected and bizarre. Loud music played by a neighborhood gang member for hours had triggered Chanel's hatred and uncontrollable aggression. These negative emotions were unleashed on the unfortunate woman. A strange reason. Indeed, investigators' confusion faded when DNA comparison results matched perfectly. Microscopic traces found on the victim's body and phone belonged to Chanel. Consequently, the police and prosecutor concluded the case was solved and ready for court. However, the motive still seemed unlikely. It's possible Chanel had noticed Karina before, since he often went to that park. He might have seen her with her father, liked her, and decided to approach her. After being rejected, he became furious and attacked her, causing the situation to spiral out of control. This scenario would have been More understandable on November 5, 2018. The trial against Chennel Lewis began. Despite his previous statements to authorities, Lewis pleaded not guilty, a stance echoed by his family denying his involvement in the crime. The prosecution charged Lewis with ending a life and sexual assault, facing him with a sentence ranging from 25 years to life imprisonment. The debate over Lewis' guilt not only unfolded in the courtroom but also spilled over into the media. Lewis' defense team stirred things up by pointing out alleged legal violations during his arrest. Along with several news outlets, they claimed racial bias and discrimination. However, the judge dismissed these allegations as baseless, emphasizing that the investigation complied with legal standards. The prosecution presented tangible evidence and DNA analysis findings, while the defense argued that this evidence was insufficient and contaminated due to many people at the crime scene, including Karina's father, who discovered her body. Forensic biologist Linda Rosano stated that odds of the DNA belonging to someone other than Lewis were 1 in 6 trillion. The prosecutor also introduced Lewis' phone records revealing his internet searches on second chances and forgiveness in Catholicism, which raised questions about what sin Chanel hoped to atone for the release of Lewis' confession video sparked further controversy. His lawyers argued he was under immense pressure, leading to a coerced confession. They suspected police might have fabricated evidence. The recording commenced only after Lewis was pressured, raising concerns that the search of his home violated protocols. The defense suggested that the investigation into Karina Vetrano's death was initially mishandled, with public pressure mounting for an arrest. They argued Lewis became a scapegoat. The jury was deeply influenced by the defense's compelling arguments. After considering both sides, jurors could not reach a conclusive verdict. On November 21, 2018, the judge declared a mistrial. A retrial was initially scheduled for January 22, 2019, but later postponed to March 2019 following 5 hours of deliberation. During the retrial, Chanel Lewis was ultimately found guilty of Karina Vetrano's death and sentenced to life without parole. On July 23, 2019, the defense employed delay tactics by citing an anonymous source to allege misconduct by a juror, suggesting jury pressure and conspiracy. A case that seemed straightforward at first sparked widespread prejudices and fears in society. Karina Vetrano's tragic death affected many, serving as a stark reminder for women to remain vigilant about their safety. Nancy Lagerquist. On the night of Sunday, July 1, 1990, Nancy Lagerquist, a Nikki 7-year-old resident at Riverside Health Care Center, was last seen alive at around 3:30 a.m. A care worker witnessed the elderly woman sound asleep in her bed. She was not distressed and appeared peaceful. The care worker closed her bedroom door and moved on to the next room. Nancy had been a resident at Riverside since December of 1988. Born in Hamilton, Montana in 1902, she graduated high school at the age of 18 and spent much of her life working as an executive secretary. Nancy was an active member of the Missoula Business and Professional Women's Club. Prior to her retirement, she never married, had no children, and had little in the way of relatives at the time of her death. Those family members, a sister, 2 nieces, and 3 nephews, didn't live near the care home. By all accounts, Nancy lived an ordinary life in the care home. She was unable to walk, and so she required around-the-clock assistance. There was nothing about her background to suggest there was a target on her back. At the time of her death at 4:30 a.m., 1 hour after Nancy was checked on at Riverside, on July 1, a worker checked on her room once more. This time, however, the alarm was raised. The 87-year-old was gone. The 5 employees on shift scattered across the building in an attempt to locate the elderly woman, but there was no sign of her. 11 minutes later, at 4:41 a.m., the police were alerted to New York's disappearance. Law enforcement promptly arrived on the scene, accompanied by search and rescue teams. They carried out an extensive search of the home and the surrounding area. The residence was located along the Clark Fork River, and boats manned by police officers were dispatched along the water at 6:30 a.m. The search was called off. Authorities had found Nancy dead near the riverbank. About 30 minutes downstream from Riverside, she had been murdered in a manner that was described by police as ritualistic. The circumstances of her death were violent, stemming from sexual assault with an object. Her body was then dumped into the water. To investigators working on the case, it soon became apparent that they would have their work cut out for them. The fact that Nancy's body had been put in the water had washed away any traces of forensic evidence, and her diaper has never been located. The police have never put forward a theory about the weapon used in the murder, and it too has never been found. Detectives soon theorized the culprit had entered and exited through New York's bedroom window, which faced the river. As the screen had been cut, however, the perpetrator had managed not to leave behind any evidence on the window or sill or in the rest of the bedroom. Furthermore, none of the alarms had gone off at any of the entrances, and all were in working order. It's unclear if the home was dusted for prints, but given the amount of staff, residents, and guests coming and going from the home, it would have been a very arduous task if it had. The only lead in the case was a man seen by a member of staff at around 4 a.m. walking through the tar park of the neighboring Missoula Athletic Club away from the river and towards East Broadway Street. He is described as being white, between the ages of 30 and 40, and weighing around 180 to 200 pounds. He has light brown collar-length hair, a mustache, and brown-rimmed glasses, and was wearing an untucked white and brown striped t-shirt, tan button front shorts, and white tennis shoes with white socks. His t-shirt was longer at the back than the front. This man was never considered a suspect but was wanted for questioning. However, it's unclear if he ever made contact with the police or was even identified by them. Reportedly, the description led to the police becoming inundated with reports due to Na's minimal family ties. A family connection was quickly ruled out, after which the authorities turned their attention to staff members. Staff at the care home would be familiar with its layout and its security measures and would know who was best to target. Investigators felt that the murder could well be an inside job and home in on one male staff member. In particular, he was eventually cleared of being involved but left the care home less than a month later. It is unclear why he left after ruling out the staff member. The police began to look at the possibility that the crime was the work of an outsider. They noted that security focused on the doors to the home, not the windows, and speculated that Nancy was picked because she was in a room facing onto to the river and was not targeted for any reason more specific than that. They interviewed a man named James Bailey on multiple occasions but eventually dropped him as a suspect. Eventually, detectives looked back at the witness statements they'd collected regarding any other potentially suspicious deaths in the home. One nurse had drawn their attention to the demise of an 86-year-old woman named Bertha Scott, an Alzheimer's sufferer who was discovered dead in her bed on May 2, 1990. She was put into restraints at night to stop her from wandering off, and because she'd suffered from heart disease, her death was assumed to be from natural causes. Neither the staff nor her family felt her demise was suspicious, except for the one nurse who had noted a bruise on Bertha's neck. She was buried without autopsy around the time of death. The care home staff had also noticed that there had been some tampering with the windows of the physical therapy room, although nothing ever really came of this on the back of the nurse's comments. The police decided to exhume Bera's body and double-check her cause of death. Her family was shocked when the police announced that she had actually been raped before being strangled to death. Bertha's life was rather different. From New York, she had been born in Pennsylvania in 1904 and was married 20 years later. She had moved to Missoula just 2 years before her death so that she could be closer to one of her surviving children. 4 of her 6 children had died before her, though she was succeeded by a vast number of grandchildren. During Bertha's medical examination, it was discovered that semen had been left behind. Although a sample was collected, it was too degraded to produce a DNA profile which would help the police find her, kill her from. Here both cases grew cold. In 1992, a man at another care home was arrested for sexually assaulting one of the residents. However, he was in prison at the time of the murders. The police also suspected Lloyd Chase Allen of being involved that same year, but he too was behind bars. When the crimes were committed in 2002, the Mullion reported that several of the care home residents had spoken of a man who roamed the halls at night, but staff had never been sure if he was real or not because the resident memories and testimony were often unreliable. It's possible this man was real and that there are more cases like Byra's where residents were killed, but it was deemed that they had died from natural causes. However, without DNA evidence, a confession, or further investigation, it seems likely we will never see this case solved. Sarah Stops Pretty Places. Born on August 14, 2001, Sarah Stops Pretty Places and her large family were members of various Native American reservations in Montana, including the Crow and North Cheyenne nations. An extremely athletic individual, Sarah was fond of basketball, football, running cross country, and wrestling. In her teen years, she had performed in several plays at Hardin High School and participated in the school's choir. She had a big heart and was described as compassionate and loving by all those who knew her. She could often be found tending to stray animals in her spare time, but Sarah's biggest ambition was to become a performer. She wanted to act and sing, and the future looked bright for the determined team until her life was horrifically ripped away shortly after her 18th birthday. Sarah was last seen on August 24, 2019 in Hardin rural town, less than half a mile off the Crow Reservation, where she lived with her legal guardian and grandmother Yolanda Frazier. It's unclear where the teen was aiming to go, but one thing is for certain: she never returned home. She had planned the following day to meet with her mother to visit North Dakota, but she failed to turn up for this get-together. Her family quickly noticed that their texts were going unanswered. Their phone calls simply rang, and that Sarah was not active on social media, which was perhaps the most telling clue of all that something was wrong. Later that day, Kerr's Aunt Priscilla Buello went to report her niece missing to the Big Horn County Sheriff's Office, but was told there was a mandatory waiting period before the report could be filed. This was later proven to be a lie. In Lana, anyone under the age of 21 is considered a mere, and that Amber Alert should have been issued instead. It wasn't until August 27 that Kerr's family was able to file the missing persons report. The police reportedly told Priscilla that the teen was probably out with her friends. There is no record, but following her disappearance, law enforcement attempted to search for the teenager. They also didn't hand out flyers, which may have helped trace her final movement and prompt witnesses to step forward. Priscilla felt that because of Kerr's troubled past and history of running away, law enforcement didn't take her case seriously. Although much of the 18-year-old's past remains a mystery to the public, it has been noted in recent articles that she had some issues with Alcohol. In April of 2019 she was found unresponsive at school because she was heavily intoxicated and she had to be rushed to the ER. Then on August 29, a passing jogger discovered Case S's body by a woodpile in the back garden of a home at the intersection of Mitchell Avenue and Rangview Drive in the Hardin suburb where she was last seen alive 5 days earlier. The homeowner was out of town when her body was found and had no connection to the teenager. Kesser's family were not notified immediately that a body had been found. Reports of a teenager's remains being discovered began circulating on social media, and the family caught wind of the rumors. They began to fear the worst. Priscilla went to the scene to ID the body but was turned away without being able to view the remains, and the local media were not alerted to the fact that a body had been found. Kara's mother along with Yolanda then went to the local mortuary so they could view the body on September 1st, but they were informed that the body didn't belong to the missing team, and so the family continued the search. It wasn't until 10 days later it was revealed that the body was in fact Quiris. The coroner ruled that she had perished on August 26th and that her death was suspicious. Her remains were already badly decomposed, so the cause of death could not be determined. Its fixation could not be ruled out. Following this discovery, the teenager's family kept the pressure on law enforcement to investigate the death. On September 12th, Kara's mother Jern was told by Terry Boulis, the county coroner and the owner of Biss Mortuary, that her daughter's remains had to be cremated in order to be returned to the family. Despite the fact this was against the family's cultural belief, Lou and would remove the possibility of further examinations of the body. Furthermore, the family had wanted the Dahl Funeral Home in Billings, Montana to handle funeral arrangements, but Boulis made them use his business and ordered Kerr's cremation before other family members arrived in Hardin. On September 14th, the family located the site where Kerr's body was discovered with the help of relatives who lived nearby. They had attempted to visit the area a few days earlier but were unable to because the scene was no longer sealed off and there was no demarcation of where the body was found. At the scene, they performed a ritual ceremony and noted that the area was very visible and had high traffic. A neighbor, Jason Cummings, who had found the body, told the family that the police had removed Kerr's phone from her pockets and that he had told them to charge it so her family could be contacted. Although they appeared to ignore this suggestion, he too had questioned why the crime scene hadn't been sanctioned off to prevent contamination. 5 days later, on September 19th, the family alerted the media to the case. The Billings Gazette told them that they called the sheriff's office daily for any crime updates and hadn't been made aware of the case. That same day, Yolanda, along with Kerr's father, Alan, went to meet up with Captain Mike Fuss of the Big Horn Sheriff County's office. When they asked why Fuss had not made contact with the family or returned their calls, he told them he had been preoccupied with other cases. When they asked why the crime scene had not been sealed off, he explained that if investigator arrived on the scene before uniformed officers, then they did not need to seal off the scene. According to Fuss, the scene was only sealed off if officers arrived first. Then Yolanda and Alan asked why law enforcement had not charged and turned on Kerr's phone. Fuss was reportedly surprised that the family knew about this, and he said that the battery was dead and so they didn't attempt to use it. Kerr's family countered this by noting that they could have charged the phone and looked at her recent communications, but Fuss said they couldn't get into that phone and that not even the FBI could. Furthermore, Fuss implied that Kesera had died from alcohol poisoning where she was found and seemed angry when the family told him they were offering a $5,000 reward for any information. He also revealed that the original investigator on the case, Jeremy Middlestead, had stepped down because he, quote, couldn't handle it. Notably, Kerr's family were not interviewed by law enforcement until this time. They also spoke with the Big Horn County Attorney J., who told the family that the coroner, Terry Bullis, had a conflict of interest in his position as a funeral home business and the county medical examiner. Harris also noted that Bullis tended to quickly determine the cause of death as exposure to alcohol and natural causes. Under his charge as coroner, however, Harris was otherwise reportedly brusque and rude towards the family and failed to provide them with clear answers to any of their questions, at one point telling them, "How do you know that nothing is being done on the 23rd? The family were notified that no missing persons report had been filed for Kara and that her name was not in the missing persons database. A week later, the FBI declined to take the case on, stating they needed more evidence that Kara was murdered on the reservation. Interestingly, just days before Kara vanished, she had filmed a video of several police officers beating her 15-year-old wheelchair-bound brother and uploaded it to social media. The incident involved several deputies from the Big Horn County Sheriff's Office, leading to several officers being reprimanded. It is believed one of the officers who responded to the scene where Kerr's body was found was one of those involved in the beating. This has sparked much speculation that the police were involved in her death or opted not to investigate in retaliation for Kara attempting to hold them responsible for their actions in August of 2021, 2 years after the teenager's death. A fresh report revealed that 4 witnesses had been discovered. The statements of these individuals are not fully consistent, but generally describe a series of events which led to an argument outside of a home on Rangeview Drive at around 3 a.m. on August 26, 2019, involving Kara and 3 other unarmed individuals, including a 17-year-old girl, 19-year-old woman, and 23-year-old man. Some reports mentioned that Kara had been hanging out at the house and that an occupant had purchased alcohol for her. Reportedly, her blood alcohol level at the time of her demise was 0.149. The argument that had occurred that night led to another nearby homeowner setting off his car alarm, hoping it would cause the group to flee. They did, scattering in different directions. Kara was last seen heading towards the area where her body was later found. The new report also mentioned that no foreign DNA was discovered underneath her fingernails and that she was diagnosed with asthma shortly before her disappearance. Chu's case is still unsolved.